tidal wave and a tsunami of oil industry in particular, but also coal industry money. So now the Trump regime came out last week and they cut millions from a Nobel Prize-winning scientist's program collaboration between NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and Princeton University. And their rationale, this is crazy. This honest to God, the Trump administration released a press release saying that they were killing climate change research that the federal government had funded that was being done jointly by NOAA and Princeton, that they were killing climate change research because it, quote, this is a verbatim quote, promotes exaggerated and implausible climate threats contributing to a phenomenon known as climate anxiety, which has increased significantly among America's youth. Right. So, you know, what are they doing? Well, you know, it's pretty straightforward. Lee Zeldin, Trump's EPA administrator, announced on Wednesday that he's going to try to overturn the federal government's core finding that greenhouse gases are bad, along with 30 other key regulatory actions going back to Nixon. The report added that Zeldin will also be cutting CO2 limits for coal-fired power plants, tailpipe emissions, methane leaks, and ending a program requiring major industries to report their CO2 emissions. In other words, to hell with our kids, to hell with the future, to hell with the climate. There's money to be made and campaign contributions to be collected. I mean, Tuesday of last week, Trump signed an executive order declaring war on individual state initiatives to dial back carbon emissions. He ordered the Department of Justice to, quote, stop the enforcement, end quote, of such state laws. They specifically identified a climate superfund program that operates in 2 states, New York and Vermont, where those states, these are state laws, those states can claw back from the fossil fuel companies the cost of damages to their states by extreme weather. So the federal government, you know, he signed an executive order saying, no, you can't. You can't do that. Fossil fuel oligarchs have got to be breaking out the champagne, right? So what are some of the other things that they're doing? Well, they exempted coal plants from mercury and air toxic standards. So now there's more mercury in our air. That's great for children, right? It just causes major neurological damage. They declared a national energy emergency so they could do away with a lot of the environmental reviews to develop fossil fuels. They rolled back vehicle emission standards, so the car manufacturers have no incentive to make cleaner cars. They reduced EPA enforcement. Under Trump, the first 3 months of Trump, the EPA has brought fewer cases against polluter. And in those cases that they have followed through on left over from Biden, they've reduced the penalties that they're seeking. And now Doge and his, Musk and his Doge teenagers are trying to gut the EPA itself. They've weakened methane emission regulations. They provided an email address where fossil fuel companies can ask for pollution exemptions on a case-by-case basis. Just make sure you made a big donation to Donald Trump. They have eliminated climate and environmental justice web pages across the government. They've reversed President Biden's Clean Power Plan, which could lead to thousands of additional premature deaths annually due to increased air pollution. They've cut funding for environmental protections, specifically largely to the EPA, but other agencies as well. They've reduced public land protections. They've reduced the size of national monuments and open protected lands to fossil fuel drilling. They've rolled back clean water protections. They narrowed the definition of protected waters of the United States. This is going to affect our drinking water. They are undermining scientific research. They want to limit the use of scientific studies in policymaking. So, you know, yeah, we're going to make decisions about, you know, pollution in the air, but we're not going to base them on science. They have reversed the Paris Climate Agreement commitment and pulled us out of the Paris Climate Agreement. They're promoting fossil fuel exports. They lifted Biden-era restrictions on fossil fuel exports. And they've reduced air quality monitoring. They're cutting air pollution monitoring programs. So, you know, the air is getting dirtier now. In fact, it is measurably dirtier now than it was just 1 year ago because of all these changes that the Trump administration has made just in the last 3 months. And yet they don't want you to know how much dirtier the air is. So, Republicans are refusing to do town halls. They're refusing to answer questions about this. They're hiding behind a timid media that itself is afraid to raise these issues, which leaves it up to us. So what do we do? Well, number one, get out in the streets as often as possible. Number two, call your representatives, particularly if they're Republicans. It only takes 4 or 5 Republicans in the House and Senate to change the course of history. Number three, make your voice heard on social media, write letters to the editor, call into talk shows, share messages like these with friends and family. And finally, contribute, if you can, to politicians who are taking brave stands against the oligarchy. This is not just politics. This is the slow motion slaughter disguised as deregulation. The Republicans won't answer for it. They won't debate it. They won't hold town halls. The media tiptoes, the billionaires cheer, and Trump signs away your children's future with a grin. But we have to fight this. It's not just about the air. In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and video media online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Defying Hitler by Sebastian Haffner, a memoir. This is from chapter 17, about a little more than a third of the way into the book. At first, the revolution only gave the impression of being an historical event like any other, a matter for the press that might just possibly have some effect on the public mood. The Nazis celebrate January 30th as their day of revolution. They are wrong. There was no revolution on January 30th, 1933, just a change of government. Hitler became chancellor, by no means the Führer of the Nazi regime. The cabinet contained only 2 Nazis apart from him. He swore an oath of allegiance to the Weimar Constitution. The general opinion was that it was not the Nazis who had won, but the bourgeois parties of the right, who had captured, in quotes, the Nazis and held all the key positions in the government. In constitutional terms, events had taken a much more conventional, unrevolutionary course than most of what had happened during the previous 6 months. Outwardly also, the day had no revolutionary aspects, unless one considers a Nazi torchlight procession through Wilhelmstrasse or a minor gunfight in the suburbs that night as signs of a revolution. For most of us outsiders, the experience of January 30th, 1933 was that of reading the papers and the emotions we felt while we were doing so. The morning headline was, "Hitler called to president." That produced a certain nervous, impotent irritation. Hitler had been called to the president in August and November. He had been offered the vice chancellorship and then the chancellorship. Both times he had set impossible conditions, and both times there had been solemn declarations, never again. Each time, never again had lasted exactly 3 months. Hitler's opponents in Germany at that time suffered from a compulsive urge to offer him everything he wanted. indefatigably, and at an even cheaper price, indeed to press it upon him. It's the same now with his opponents outside Germany. Again and again, this appeasement was formally renounced, and again it gaily reappeared at the crucial moment. Just so today. Then, as now, one's only hope was Hitler's own unreasonableness. Would it not sooner or later exhaust the patience of his opponents? Then, as now, it became apparent that their patience knew no bounds. At midday, the headline said, "Hitler makes impossible demands." We nodded, half reassured. It was only too credible. It would have gone against his nature to ask for less than too much. Perhaps the cup had once more passed from us. Hitler, the last defense against Hitler. At about 5 o'clock, the evening papers arrived. Cabinet of National Unity formed Hitler Reichschancellor. I don't know what the general reaction was. For about a minute, mine was completely correct. Icy horror. Certainly this had been a possibility for a long time. You had to reckon with it. Nevertheless, it was so bizarre, so incredible to read it now in black and white. Hitler Reichschancellor. For a moment, I physically sensed the man's odor of blood and filth, the nauseating approach of a man-eating animal, its foul, sharp claws in my face. Then I shook the sensation off, tried to smile, started to consider, and found many reasons for reassurance. That evening, I discussed the prospects of the new government with my father. We agreed it had a good chance of doing a lot of damage, but not much chance of surviving very long. A deeply reactionary government with Hitler as its mouthpiece. Apart from this, it did not really differ much from the two governments that had succeeded Bruning's. Even with the Nazis, it would not have a majority in the Reichstag. Of course, that could always be dissolved, but the government had a clear majority of the population against it, in particular the working class, which would probably go communist now that the Social Democrats had completely discredited themselves. One could prohibit the communists, but that would only make them more dangerous. In the meantime, the government would be likely to implement reactionary social and cultural measures with some anti-Semitic additions to please Hitler. That would not attract any of its opponents to its side. Foreign policy would probably be a matter of banging the table. There might be an attempt to rearm. That would automatically add the outside world to the 60% of the home population who were against the Hitler government. Besides, who were the people who had suddenly started voting Nazi in the last 3 years? Misguided ignoramuses, for the most part, victims of propaganda, a fluctuating mass that would fall apart at the first disappointment. No, all things considered, this government was not a cause for alarm. The only question was what would come after it. It was possible that they would drive the country to civil war. The communists were capable of going on the attack before a prohibition against them came into force. The next day, this turned out to be the general opinion of the intelligent press. It is curious how plausible an argument it is, even today, when we know what came next. How could things turn out so completely different? Perhaps it was just because we were all so certain that they could not do so, and relied on that with far too much confidence. So we neglected to consider that it might, if worse came to worse, be necessary to prevent the disaster from happening. Through the whole of February 1933, everything that happened remained a matter for the press. In other words, it took place in an arena that would lose all reality for 99% of the population the moment there were no newspapers. Admittedly, enough occurred in that arena. The Reichstag was dissolved. Then, in a flagrant breach of the Constitution, Hindenburg also dissolved the Prussian regional parliament. There were fast and furious changes of personnel in the civil service. The book defined Hitler.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, happy Friday, TGIF, Shabbat Shalom, Juma Mubarak. It is the end of the week, the beginning of the weekend. What a great, it's a beautiful day here in Portland, by the way. Walked into work this morning, it was only in the 40s, but it's just lovely. And I think it's going to get up to 73 today. So if you're east of me, you've got good weather coming. Yesterday was a great day, too. A lot to talk about today. America's moral collapse is not hypothetical. It's on a plane to Libya. Also, who's the real Pope Leo? And an absolute disgrace. There is absolute fury coming after Donald Trump as he fires an American hero with a 2-sentence email because she is black. In the second hour of our program, how the Republican Party became America's Ministry of Propaganda. Also, is the FBI covering up the Epstein Files? New revelations. This is totally weird. James O'Keefe, the guy who does these videos where he catches people in, whatever. He caught Pam Bondi talking about how she's got thousands of videos of Jeffrey Epstein having sex with young girls or people at Jeffrey Epstein's place. Is Donald Trump in those videos? We'll talk about that. Also, Justice Sonia Sotomayor said Thursday the lawyer should stand up and fight. God bless her. In the third hour of our program, what is Trump even doing anymore? Is it possible that he actually has no plan? He has no idea what's going on. The guy's 78 years old, that he's actually losing it, that everything we're seeing is just like random crap, that he's, it's like, back when he was a businessman. Oh yeah, let's try the Trump steaks. Oh, let's try an airline. Let's try a game, a board game. Let's try, and none of it works out, right? I think he's just repeating this pattern. But we'll talk about that in the third hour. Also, Trump's new threat will keep the internet out of reach for millions, according to a nonpartisan group. So a lot to talk about. Plus, it's Anything Goes weekend. Anything Goes Friday. Whatever topics you would like to talk about, we can dig into. But to start out, this was my op-ed, my daily takeover at HartmannReport.com yesterday. It was titled, America's Moral Collapse is Not Hypothetical. It's on a Plane to Libya. And, good God, America stands at a moral precipice, and we're about to fall over the edge. The Trump administration, well, first of all, let me lay this out. Libya, you remember Libya, Muammar Gaddafi and all that, and, President Obama had him assassinated, and that caused the whole country to just, be thrown back to the Stone Age, essentially, for a while. And what came out of this is that there are now two Libyas. There's the Libya that is recognized by the United Nations, that's based in the country's capital, Tripoli, which is the official Libyan government. And that controls I believe it's the west side of the country. I may have that wrong, so fact check me on that. But they control half the country anyway. The other half of the country is controlled by a warlord. His name is Khalifa Haftar. And Khalifa Haftar's son appears to be good friends with the Trump family. In fact, he came over to the United States last week and met with Tiffany Trump's father-in-law, who is now Trump's special envoy to the Middle East. This is the guy who had claimed that he was a billionaire with a trucking empire, and it turned out after Tiffany married his son, thinking she was marrying a billionaire's son, turned out that he just owned a truck, not even a trucking company. But anyway, he's the envoy to the Middle East with a nice big paycheck, and so the Libyan warlord's son came over to hang out with him last week, and now Trump is talking about shipping our immigrants in the United States that he doesn't want here, shipping them to Libya, where none of them came from. Which raises, it raises a couple of questions. I think the main question is, why are we putting immigrants in prison at all? Right? If somebody comes here from Mexico or Guatemala or Honduras or Venezuela or wherever and enters the country illegally, or in the case of apparently most of these people that Trump is having arrested and kicked out, they actually show up at the border and present themselves and say, I'm here to apply for asylum, and we let them in and say, okay, cool, we'll give you a court date. That's what international and federal law requires. So the vast majority of the people that Trump has been deporting actually have the legal right to be here in the United States. It's temporary. And Trump is repealing it left and right. But most of them, when they were snatched, had no idea that they had lost that right, and many of them continue to have that right. So why are we putting them in prison? Why not, if somebody's here from Guatemala and they're here illegally and we've decided that we're just not going to let them stay, why not just put them on a plane to Guatemala? Why send them to a prison in El Salvador? Why send them, for God's sake, why send them to Libya? I mean, Amnesty International, and here's the answer why, I think. I think this is why Trump is doing this. Amnesty International has documented, and I quote, severe beatings, sexual violence, extortion, forced labor, and inhumane conditions in these Libyan prisons that are controlled by this Libyan warlord. I mean, this is not even a government that is like even remotely obligated to comply with UN, this, that, and the other thing. And our own government, the State Department, the United States State Department, says that Libyans' detention centers are harsh and life-threatening, with migrants having no access to courts or due process. Doctors Without Borders has documented female detainees being told that if they want food, they have to give sex to the prison guards, and, quote, you are going to die here. They're also running slave labor, forced labor. They're taking these people, the warlord is taking the people who are in his prisons and having them work as slaves. So this is what Hank Johnson, a Democratic congressman from Georgia, told Raw Story. He said, it's deeply distressing and disturbing that there would be a time in this country where we would find the worst places to deport people to instead of places where they came from, their homelands. Not sending them back there, but sending them to the worst location we could send them to just to punish them. Well, this is what I think is really going on, is what we are seeing is Stephen Miller, who apparently hates people of color. And make no mistake about it, they're not deporting illegal immigrants from Ireland or from Sweden or Norway or Scotland. They're deporting illegal immigrants from countries where most of the people have brown skin or black skin. And so, remember Trump's first term? Let's tear the babies away from their mothers. It'll shock the conscience of the world. It'll horrify people to the point that they won't come here anymore. The theory that they are operating under is the same theory that the proponents of the death penalty operate under, which is if you can make something so frightening, so terrible, so horror-filled, which is what the death chambers are, it will deter people from committing crimes. Now, what's wrong with that is that there's nearly 100 years worth of research proving that the death penalty does not deter murder. It doesn't stop people from killing other people. Similarly, doing this, I think, is probably not going to deter people from trying to get into the United States. They'll just figure out different ways to do it. I mean, it may stop some people, but this is the worst possible way to do this. I mean, yes, come to this country and we'll ship you to a Libyan prison. Really? I mean, this strategy doesn't just harm migrants. This corrupts the soul of America. It transforms us from a nation, despite our many failings, that at least aspires to the goals of dignity and justice, into one that purposefully inflicts violence and suffering as policy, that is using slavery and rape as policy. Joe Biden would say, this is not who we are. And I think they're absolutely right. So let's just cut the crap. Trump's and Miller's policy of mass deportation and now, I would say criminal mass deportation is not about safety or security. It's about punishment, deterrence, and performative cruelty for political gain, the same way dictators around the world run their countries. Oh, you stand up to Maduro, or you stand up to Putin, or you stand up to Orban, you go to jail. Well, these kind of things don't, they start with the immigrants, they don't end with the immigrants. Hitler started with the immigrants. I mean, seriously. It doesn't end with the immigrants. Eventually, they come for us. So we need to wake the hell up. We need to break through the normalization of this cruelty. We need to support the legal challenges that are underway. And let me add, the ACLU is at the forefront of much of this. I send them money every month. I encourage everybody else to. Third, keep this issue visible. And fourth, demand transparency. What the hell is going on here? And call your congressperson. 202-224-3121 is their phone number. Tell them America doesn't torture people to send a message. Tell them we're better than this. Because if we aren't, what exactly is it that we're defending here in the land of the free? 16 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls. In just a moment, stay with us.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. I'll be right back with your call. And welcome back. Mark Taylor Canfield. Hey, Mark, give us a report on the 57th press freedom ranking that the U.S. just achieved.
Hey, Tom. May 3rd was World Press Freedom Day as designated by the United Nations, and Reporters Without Borders released their new rankings for the World Press Freedom Index, and the United States is now ranked 57th in the world in terms of press freedom. Unfortunately, as in past years, almost no U.S. media is reporting on it, despite my best efforts to lobby other news organizations to cover the story.
Yep.
Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal did make a public statement at the request of the group I work with, Democracy Watch News. She made a statement on World Press Freedom Day on the importance of press freedom in the United States and criticized the Trump administration for their attacks on the press. You can read my article about that at democracywatchnews.org. It'll be published in the next couple of days. Mm-hmm. And I'm also reporting about this at my YouTube channel at the MTC Report. But I participated in an event sponsored by Amnesty International USA, which included the executive directors for the Committee to Protect Journalists and Reporters Without Borders. And according to Reporters Without Borders, less than 1% of the world's population is now living in an area where press freedom is assured. There's been a huge drop around the world.
Wow.
20 countries dropped on the Press Freedom Index list this year, including the United States. Authoritarianism and repression of press is growing across the globe. And as I've said many times, it's the duty of all journalists, editors, publishers, news producers to speak out, resist threats to freedom of the press, and expose the nation's slip into autocratic fascism, because without a free press, democracy will not survive. The top countries on the press freedom list are Scandinavian countries as usual, and so. But it also includes some surprises. Norway is number 1, Estonia is number 2, the Netherlands are number 3, and Sweden is number 4.
Wow!
But unfortunately, Tom, except for your program and a very few other places, I think Axios covered it after I lobbied them to do that, but it's just something that the United States press is not reporting, and I think that's really a shame. I think every major news organization in the country should be talking about this and should be celebrating World Press Freedom Day, but apparently, they've got their own problems or other issues to deal with, so they're not talking about it. You'll have to go to Reuters or the BBC or DW out of Germany in order to get any information about this. So I'm disappointed in my colleagues in the United States as usual, unfortunately, Tom.
Yeah, it's rather shocking. Mark, tell us about your organization.
Well, Democracy Watch News is a nonprofit organization, and we specialize. I'm also editor for Press Freedom for that organization, and we specialize in issues like human rights and freedom of the press. And, so this has been a story that's been number 1 on our minds over the last few years. And it's gotten so much worse under the Trump administration. And I can quote Reporters Without Borders about that. They say, President Donald Trump was elected to a second term after a campaign in which he designated the press on a daily basis and made explicit threats to weaponize the federal government against the media. His early moves in his second mandate to politicize the Federal Communications Commission and ban the Associated Press have jeopardized the country's news outlets and indicate that he intends to follow through on his threats. So it's a crisis for American journalism right now, as we speak.
Yeah, agreed. Mark Taylor Canfield out of Seattle. Mark, thanks again. Thanks. It's always great to hear from you.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it.
Good talking. We'll be right back. 21 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. Stay tuned. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. You know, other countries enjoy benefits like free health care in college, modern mass transit, affordable housing, food, and drugs. They also have inexpensive internet and phone service without companies listening and selling their information. Schools that don't need to mention school shooters. Streets and parks filled with pedestrians and children instead of tents and homeless people. We, on the other hand, have the world's largest collection of billionaires. Most Americans probably didn't realize this was the choice they were making back in the election of 1980 when Reagan and Bush promised morning in America. But here we are. We have been just basically sold out to the billionaires by all these years of Republican, Reaganomics. What do we do about it? Well, there's a lot we can do about it, and it starts with getting politically active. There's a great op-ed about this over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled, America Chose Wealth Over Well-Being. Check it out.
Military planes in the dead of night, carrying souls far out of sight, to Libya's camps where anguish reigns, and freedom's loss becomes their chains. This is Trump's new deportation horror, a tale of sorrow, shame, and terror. Lies uprooted, dreams denied in the land where justice used to reside. They came with hope, seeking refuge is light, fleeing from shadows, chasing what's right. But gates have closed and hearts turned to stone. Now they're cast into the great unknown. This is Trump's new deportation horror, a tale of sorrow, shame, and terror. Lies uprooted, dreams denied in the land where justice used. This is Trump's new deportation horror, a system built on pain and power, where empathy is left behind and cruelty is redefined. But voices rise, a swelling fire, demanding truth, lifting the choir. End this terror, end this shame, bring America back to its name.
Welcome back. 24 minutes past the hour. So Qasim Rashid, who we should probably get on this program one of these days, he writes a great Substack, QasimRashid.com, QasimRashid. Anyhow, he went through through Pope Leo's Twitter history. And this is fascinating. By the way, lest I forget, Jefferson Smith filled in for me yesterday. And thank you so much, Jefferson, if you're listening. He does such a great job, and we're so fortunate to have a good guy in town here who can fill in. But the reason he filled in was because CBS News sent a camera crew to my house yesterday, and for what was supposed to be a 20-minute interview, and it turned into a 2-hour interview about the new Gilded Age. This is for a digital piece that will appear on the CBS News website next month. So I'll keep you filled in. But that was a hoot. Anyway, Qasim Rashid is writing what I learned by reading Pope Leo's entire Twitter history. And let me just share, these are the tweets and retweets of Pope Leo the 14th now, who picked up his, the American Pope from Chicago, who picked up his title from the last Pope, Leo, the 13th, was the tail end of the 19th century. And he was the guy who basically embraced modernity for the church. Said, no, we're going to move into the 21st or the 20th century here. So anyhow, he on March 5th, 2015, he tweeted, "It's time to end the death penalty." He also tweeted why Donald Trump's anti-immigration rhetoric is so problematic. He retweeted another priest who said, we're banning all Syrian refugees, the men, women, and children who most need help. What an immoral nation we are becoming. Jesus weeps. He retweeted a Cardinal Kupich, saying, quote, "There is nothing even remotely Christian, American, or morally defensible about a policy that takes children away from their parents and warehouses them in cages. This is being carried out in our name, and the shame is on all of us." This is our new Pope, right? Or if you're Catholic, your new Pope. He retweeted Rocco Palmo, who said, Trump's saying Trump's bad hombres line fuels racism and nativism. Call bishops, send preemptive blast on DACA repeal. He goes after J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is wrong. Jesus didn't ask us to rank our love for others. He retweeted Chris Murphy saying, to my colleagues, your cowardice cannot be whitewashed by thoughts and prayers. None of this ends unless we do something to stop it. And he said, we need to hear more from leaders in the church to reject racism and seek justice. I mean, this guy is woke.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
He tweets, we continue to pray for Mr. George Floyd and his family. He retweets that. He retweets, we are one, International Day for the Elimination of Racism. Today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Cokeland, The Secret History of Coke Industries and Corporate Power in America by Christopher Leonard. This is from the preface. On May 18th, 1981, 4 Wall Street bankers traveled to Wichita, Kansas. They went there to make an offer to Charles Koch, the CEO of an obscure mid-size energy company. The bankers from Morgan Stanley wanted to convince Koch to take his family's company public, offering shares for sale on the New York Stock Exchange. Their deal was squarely in line with the conventional wisdom of corporate America at the time. Going public was seen as a natural progression for companies like Koch Industries, offering them access to big pools of money and promising enormous paydays for the existing team of executives. All it required from the CEO was to surrender control. Morgan Stanley, in return, would collect a small fortune in fees. Charles Koch was 45 years old. He had run Koch Industries since he was 32 when his father died suddenly. He was trim, tall, and had an athlete's build. He spoke quietly in meetings and seemed almost passive. The bankers laid out their plan to take Koch public. They revealed what, to most executives at least, might have been the most significant detail. If Charles Koch agreed to the deal, he could earn $20 million overnight. The bankers seemed incredulous when they prepared a confidential memo about Koch's reaction. He does not want this cash, the memo reported. Charles Koch calmly explained to them why their offer made no sense. His company was breathtakingly profitable. It operated in vital, deeply complex corners of the American energy industry. During the 1980s, Koch Industries was the largest purchaser and transporter of U.S. crude oil. It owned an oil refinery. It employed teams of commodity traders who bought and sold a wildly diverse menu of raw materials and financial products, from gasoline to paper futures contracts. This might have encouraged most CEOs to take their company public. Koch Industries, however, did not want outsiders to know how much money its traders were earning. Taking the company public would expose too many of its secrets. The memo said, certain of Koch's commodity traders are particularly worried that their high salaries, once disclosed to the public, would be used against them by their trading partners. Secrecy was a strategic necessity for Koch Industries. Charles Koch did not want to surrender it. He also didn't want to surrender control. He had a specific, clear vision of how to run his company, and he didn't need Wall Street investors to interfere. If the bankers expected Charles Koch to go along with the conventional wisdom of their time, then they, like so many outsiders, did not understand him. Beneath his low-key veneer, Charles Koch was, at his core, a fighter. He had unmovable ideas about how things should be, and he did not back down when challenged. When he was challenged by his own brothers for control of Koch Industries, he fought them in a bitter legal battle that lasted decades. When he was challenged by members of a powerful labor union during his first years as CEO, he fought them even as they committed an act of industrial sabotage that nearly destroyed Koch's oil refinery. When the FBI and the U.S. Department of Justice launched a criminal investigation into Koch Industries' oil gathering business, Charles Koch fought them with every legal and political tool at his disposal. When a liberal Congress and President Barack Obama sought to impose regulations on the fossil fuel industry to control greenhouse gas emissions, Charles Koch fought them in ways that changed U.S. politics. In each of these fights, Charles Koch prevailed. When Charles Koch dismissed the bankers in 1981, it was just a small skirmish in the larger war to control Koch Industries. After prevailing in that fight, he created a company that was true to his vision. He avoided the snares that entangled many publicly traded companies that report their financial results to investors every 3 months. Koch Industries didn't have to think quarter to quarter. The company thinks year to year. An internal think tank and deal-making committee called the Development Group will sometimes think through a business deal on a timeline measured in decades. This long-term view made Coke more nimble where other companies stumbled. In 2003, for example, Koch Industries bought a group of money-losing fertilizer plants when no publicly traded company was willing to take the risk. Today, those plants are as profitable as a broken ATM machine that spews out cash around the clock. Unlike publicly traded companies, Koch Industries does not pay out rich dividends to investors. Charles Koch insists on reinvesting at least 90% of the company's profits, fueling its constant expansion. This strategy laid the foundation for decades of continuous growth. Koch Industries expanded continuously by purchasing other companies and branching out into new industries. It specialized in the kind of businesses that are indispensable to modern civilization, but which most consumers never directly encounter. The company is embedded in the hidden infrastructure of everyday life. Millions of people use Koch's products without ever seeing Koch's name attached. Koch refines and distributes fossil fuels, from gasoline to jet fuel, on which the global economy is dependent. Koch is the world's third largest producer of nitrogen fertilizer, which is the cornerstone of our modern food system. Koch makes the synthetic materials used in baby diapers, waistbands, and carpets. It makes the chemicals used for plastic bottles and pipes. It owns Georgia Pacific, which makes the wall panels, beams, and plywood required to build homes and office buildings. It makes napkins, paper towels, stationery, newspaper, and personal hygiene products. Koch Industries owns a network of commodities trading offices in Houston, Moscow, Geneva, and elsewhere, which are the circulatory system of modern finance. The book, Kochland, by Christopher Leonard.
Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out.
Solid ground where facts were bricks and truth was sound, but now the tides have turned to lies, the truth drowned under darkened skies. A billion screens, a million tales spun from webs where reason fails. We're chasing shadows, losing sight of what's wrong and what's right. America's post-truth plunge, we're sinking deeper, voices hung. Who's to blame? Who holds the rope when lies replace our only hope?
Welcome back. 35 minutes past the hour. An absolute disgrace. Donald Trump fired the Library of Congress, Carla Hayden, with a 2-sentence email. Hayden is the first woman and the first African American to lead the Library of Congress, the National Library. She is also is the first professional librarian appointed to that role in decades. She was nominated for a 10-year term by Barack Obama in 2016, so she should be there for another year. But Trump was like, oh my God, a black woman? Hegseth is over there with the military firing all the black generals and all the females. And so, hey, there's a black woman, 2 strikes against her over as Librarian of Congress, so get rid of her. I don't know why the media is not reporting on the clearly racist purging of our government. I mean, 1/3 of our federal employees, roughly, are black. Black people are only, between 14 and 17% of our population, depending on, whose numbers you're looking at. And that's because the federal government was the first agency back in the 60s, was the first large institution to say, we're going to start implementing hiring policies that are colorblind. We're going to hire people regardless of their race. It's not going to be a factor. And black people were like, really? So I can get hired here. So a lot of black people started applying for federal jobs and getting them because they were qualified. And so, of course, Elon Musk, the guy who grew up in all white apartheid South Africa, his family stayed there until apartheid fell, and that's when they fled, who was driven in a chauffeur-driven Rolls Royce every day to his all-white elementary school. He's going after federal employees. Why not? Of course, inflict as much harm on as many people as possible who are black, or in this case, who are female too. It's crazy. Anyhow, what's on your mind today? It's Anything Goes Friday. John in Athens, Ohio. Hey, John, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Well, thanks so much for your insight into what's going on in this crazy world around us. I wanted to follow up on a topic that was, I know, discussed recently in your program about the need for changing the way the money system works, the monetary system, because as you mentioned earlier, we made a decision to concentrate wealth. We made a decision for wealth, and it's part and parcel of the money system. And there's an organization, of course, I think you're aware of, the Alliance for Just Money, and I'm part of that. And I'm also presenting to the League of Women Voters a case for trying to get the League to address the issue of how the current monetary system concentrates wealth and stands in the way of the League values, which are obviously for democracy and a lot of good things that support people. So we've given these caucuses at national conventions of the League of Women Voters, and we're about to give the third one to our Ohio State League next week. And so these discussions on how the money system works are really difficult discussions because people, assume that they have money and don't think about whether or not how our money is entered into circulation affects the freedom in society and affects equality and all of those things. But as you well know, it does. So we're going to be talking to the League of Women Voters about this, and each year we've made a proposal to the National League that we've been there 2 years in a row to do a more thorough study of the monetary system and its influence on League values and positions on issues. And so the first year we didn't get many votes in favor of it, and the second year we got a lot more. And so we'll probably go back in 2026 and make another proposal. And my suspicion is that given the turmoil that, you've been talking about of what's going on in the nation right now, people are aware of the fact that we have been taken over by extreme concentration of wealth.
Yeah.
And the League has, opposed big money in politics. But can you keep big money out of politics if you allow this enormous concentration of wealth and the power it automatically
it becomes
holds?
very, very difficult. I mean, even if you limit campaign contributions, you end up with institutions like, these guys who have created this little club for Supreme Court justices. I think they call it the Supreme Court Museum or something down the street. You've got Donald Trump and his son starting, a private members-only club with a $500,000 membership fee. As a place where lobbyists and legislators can hang out together. You've got ALEC, nationwide in every single state. I'm with you, John, and good luck. The League of Women Voters can be a powerful voice if they get motivated. So I wish you the very best of luck on that. Thank you. Cliff in Santa Clarita, California. Hey, Cliff, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, been a minute. You had a woman call last week about the American flag, and I've had the same thoughts, before that escalator ride. I just look at somebody had an American flag out as a patriot or somebody that was served in our military. Now, every time I see a flag, every time I see a flag, it just says, oh, there's a Trumpster. And that's just disturbing to me.
Yeah.
Kudos to Louise for her amazing songs and lyrics. It's great stuff.
Well, thank you. I'll pass that along.
Yeah, and we both know that the mainstream media has done a horrendous job covering Orange Man since day one. I won't get into that. But what are the odds that he didn't have people pay to take his tests in college?
Oh, I think it's probably the only way he got through college. The man's not that bright.
Absolutely.
And not just that he's not that bright. I mean, when you're asked what the Declaration of Independence is all about and you say it's a document of love, when it was a declaration of war, I mean, this guy, I don't think he was paying attention even in high school or elementary school.
Of course not. He's a complete phony, 100% phony. And all these politicians and pundits who praise him all the time and call him a genius, I mean, don't they realize that they're destroying their own credibility and how pathetic they're coming across?
No,
Really,
they don't
really
care
amazing.
about that. They care about positions and power and wealth, and that's what an alignment with Donald Trump can provide you. And it's the sad thing about it, though, Cliff, is that if you look at basically every other country in the world that's been taken over by a dictator, whether it's Maduro's Venezuela on the left or whether it's Viktor Orban's Hungary on the right or Russia's Putin. You've got all these people who jumped in with that dictator early on and said, yeah, I want to be part of this. He's so cool. And within a year or two, they're all in trouble. I mean, the same thing happened to the people around Hitler. Ultimately, the end of the Night of the Long Knives, they got killed. It's such a stupid game to think that you can hop into bed with a dictator and he's not going to bite you eventually. It's like trying to hop into a bed with an alligator. Cliff, thank you. Spot on. Rick in Seattle. Hey, Rick, what's on your mind today? Rick in Seattle, listening on KBCS.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, what's up?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I do.
Well, I tried to put my guitar down. I'm practicing for the Northwest Folklife Festival.
Oh,
and
very
I wanted
cool.
to answer.
Good on you.
I wanted to answer where have all the folk singers gone? That might be something that I'll have to do next week if we don't have enough time to talk about empathy, because I think it's like basic to everything. And I started a Google Doc of empathy. I really appreciate you bringing it up. I mean, it seems like it's the bottom of everything. I think, first of all, we should think there's no bad babies.
Yeah.
I mean, Trump wasn't a bad baby. Elon Musk wasn't a bad baby. But someplace along the line, you got Elon Musk saying the fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy.
Right.
It's on the Joe Rogan thing.
Yeah,
you can find it on Snopes.
No, I wrote about it.
And, and that you probably know that Hannah Arendt said the death of human empathy is earliest and most telling sign of culture about the fall into barbarism.
Yeah.
And what the guys who were looking at psychologists who were looking at the Nuremberg defendants said about their
absolute lack of empathy
and stuff like that. So, if we're looking at the basis of evil, I don't think it's a mystery about why some people can be so mean to other people. And it starts pretty early in your life. If you look at Walter Isaacson's book on Musk and see what happened to him when his favorite dog was killed because he bit him. Stuff like that.
Wow.
Anyway.
Yeah, I haven't read the book, but it's still a debate, Rick, in the psychological community about whether sociopathy and psychopathy, sociopaths and psychopaths are born or made. There's a growing, I would argue, I don't think you can call it a consensus, but a growing body of opinion that suggests that it's both, that there's a gene that causes some people to be less, more vulnerable to assault in their childhood, causing them to turn off their empathy, whereas other people just fall apart as a result of it. They get.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hopefully that's not right, because it would lead towards eugenics, not.
Well, it may be the thing. I mean, there are psychologists who argue, or sociologists who argue, that the lack of empathy is one of the things that has brought us modern civilization. That the will to power, the willingness to create dynasties, the willingness to step all over people in order to build big companies, that these things These things have arguably, and most of your major technological advances of the last 2 centuries have happened as a result of wars, right? I mean, the Civil War was a huge advance in weapons technology, particularly guns and rifles, but also cannons. The World War I, huge advance in aircraft technology. World War II, huge advance in a whole spectrum of technologies, principally things like radar and sonar so I've read articles in the past where people are trying to rationalize this, saying war is a great thing. It advances humanity, but I'm willing to acknowledge there might be some small amount of truth to it, that gene that we inherited from the monkeys, from the apes, actually from chimpanzees, who engage in regular warfare, genocidal warfare. That gene may have some value, and and that's why 21% of our CEOs are psychopaths or sociopaths.
Wow.
I'm
skeptical. Your listener here has, as many listeners do, has more to say. So I'll call back in and we'll talk about.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you. I'm sorry.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's just about 48 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you in 1 minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. Justin in Maui, Hawaii. Hey, Justin. What's up?
Hey, I got a phone call this week from a teacher, and what happened was ICE. First in Hawaii, I'm a teacher, and in order to fill the teacher shortage, they decided to bring over a whole bunch of teachers from the Philippines on J-1 visas. Mm-hmm. Well, there was over about 10 of them living in a house together. And on Tuesday, I believe it was, at like 6:30 in the morning, ICE was at their door, beating on their door, and they didn't show them a warrant. I don't know if they showed the ownership a warrant, but they just barged in and pulled everybody out of the house. Didn't even let people, some of them were like in robes, in a towel, like just trying to get ready for
taking
school.
Showers and stuff.
And they weren't allowed to like put on their clothes, and they were held at gunpoint. And after about an hour, like one that's been here for a long time that wasn't from the Philippines was like, just let me show you the visa. We're all teachers. This is misinformation. There's nobody illegal here. And they finally let them get their documents. And then they said, well, we were looking for, after they found out they were all legal, they said, we were looking for some Mexican man that was here over a year ago. So I don't know if they were targeted. Someone thought that they were, illegal, but turned out not. But they're traumatized. Welcome to America. Guns pointed at your head.
Were these all women?
Thanks for teaching the kids. Yeah, that's to my knowledge, it was. And the Senator Schatz said, this is abuse of power. Senator Hirono spoke about this on the floor of the Senate floor. So thankfully they stepped up. But the big question we have, Indivisible Maui, is, what if they were taken on a plane, to Libya? Because the Trump strategy is to take people out of a state before the state court can intervene. Right. And so I called the Governor Green's office. I was like, what's your, we've been asking for months, what's your rapid response plan? And they said to call the Attorney General. And then the Attorney General's office said, well, we can't tell you what that is. And I'm like, well, what if it happened to me? What if they targeted me? And they said, well, can't give you any information. And I was like, wow. So we're, because I was told in Vermont, the ACLU had a habeas corpus brief ready to go, and just in case this happened, and was able to successfully stop a Palestinian immigrant from being taken out of the state. Mm-hmm. So the low-hanging fruit here is, hey, if this happened yesterday, thank God they weren't taken, but what about tomorrow? And there's been nothing from the governor's office. So
amazing.
Depressing.
Amazing. Is it being widely covered in the media in Hawaii,
Justin?
Yes. I advised her to go to the teachers union, and they did. And the teachers union had a press conference, kept the person anonymous, and because they were freaked out. And there's stories all over the local news. So it's kind of like adding on to what happened to the Oklahoma family of accidental raid, so-called accidental.
Yeah, I'm with you. Those officers, if they did not have a warrant, should be prosecuted. I mean, that's.
They showed a warrant afterwards, and it didn't have their names on it, but they didn't show it before.
Yeah.
So
amazing. Justin, thanks. Thanks so much for calling in and sharing. Thank you. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Well, it's the brand new Confederate States of America, plantation politics. You know, the old Confederate States, today known as MAGA America, the new Confederate States, were devoted to making America as white as possible, stripping women and minorities of political and economic power, gutting workers' rights, rigging election outcomes, their leaders nakedly taking bribes, using the phony veneer of Christianity to justify brutal policies, including slavery, making queer people invisible, reconfiguring schools for indoctrination, having their militias terrorize minorities and their opponents, and maintaining a government of, by, and for rich white men. And these are the principles, the core principles around which the modern-day GOP has reorganized itself. You can find an entire article about this that lays the whole thing out over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled The Plantation Politics of MAGA America. Is this the future we want? Check it out.
It starts with a promise, a populist glow of how to shake the system, make the status quo go. But behind the curtain, the stage is set for a power play we won't soon forget. They charm the crowd, they seize the mic, then target the truth and dim the light. The pillars quake, the ground runs red, a democracy hangs by a thread.
Well, about 54 minutes past the hour, picking up your calls here on Anything Goes Weekend. Bill in Etheridge, Tennessee. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how you been?
Fine, thank you. Yesterday was an entertaining day.
I tried to catch you Friday. I've been in touch with an old friend. Turns out to be an Islander with you, Mark Thoman.
Oh, yeah.
Been keeping in touch with him a little bit.
Mark used to answer our phones here.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And when I heard he retired, I asked Matthias, was that his name?
Mateo.
Yeah. Mateo, yeah. If he'd let Mark know my number, and Mark called me back, and I called him back, and so we've been
isn't that sweet?
From time to time.
Isn't that sweet? Yeah, Mark is retired now. He came in and answered phones for a year or so as part of his retirement, and then decided, I just want to be retired.
I tried to get in last Friday at the end of the show, be the last caller. You had been talking to a man about For What It's Worth, and it was a discussion between Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and Buffalo Springfield.
Yeah.
Well, I've got it queued up right here, Buffalo Springfield, written by Stephen Stills in '69, and I'd like to play it for your crowd this morning. And it's a 3-minute song, and
well, I only have 90 seconds, Bill, but give it a rip if you want to try.
Okay, if it's too loud, you just holler, turn her down.
Okay.
Here we go.
Our musical performance today by Bill from Etheridge, Tennessee.
Can you hear it?
Yeah, Bill, I gotta ask you to stop though, because you're playing. You got to stop here, Bill, because you're playing copyrighted music on my show, and that's gonna get me bumped off YouTube. You can't do that. Sorry, I thought you were gonna play your own guitar, but anyhow, it's a great song. I'm with you. It's a great song, and so
Anything else you wanted to talk about? I've got another 20 seconds here before we're going to hit the break.
If we don't start coming together and realizing that, I bought 6 T-shirts the other day. They say, smile now and cry later.
Yeah.
And the right is going to realize before too long that once they're used up, if Trump does, because he's going to pull another January 6th at the end of his term, I'll guarantee it.
I fully expect it. Bill, thank you for the call. I fully expect it. Oh, that was us playing music. Okay, my apologies, Bill. I fully, but we're hitting the break here. So anyhow, I'll be back on the other side of this break with the second hour of Anything Goes Weekend. It's you and me all 3 hours today. We'll be right back with more of your calls. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Cokeland, The Secret History of Coke Industries and Corporate Power in America by Christopher Leonard. This is from the preface. On May 18th, 1981, 4 Wall Street bankers traveled to Wichita, Kansas. They went there to make an offer to Charles Koch, the CEO of an obscure mid-size energy company. The bankers from Morgan Stanley wanted to convince Koch to take his family's company public, offering shares for sale on the New York Stock Exchange. Their deal was squarely in line with the conventional wisdom of corporate America at the time. Going public was seen as a natural progression for companies like Koch Industries, offering them access to big pools of money and promising enormous paydays for the existing team of executives. All it required from the CEO was to surrender control. Morgan Stanley, in return, would collect a small fortune in fees. Charles Koch was 45 years old. He had run Koch Industries since he was 32 when his father died suddenly. He was trim, tall, and had an athlete's build. He spoke quietly in meetings and seemed almost passive. The bankers laid out their plan to take Koch public. They revealed what, to most executives at least, might have been the most significant detail. If Charles Koch agreed to the deal, he could earn $20 million overnight. The bankers seemed incredulous when they prepared a confidential memo about Koch's reaction. He does not want this cash, the memo reported. Charles Koch calmly explained to them why their offer made no sense. His company was breathtakingly profitable. It operated in vital, deeply complex corners of the American energy industry. During the 1980s, Koch Industries was the largest purchaser and transporter of U.S. crude oil. It owned an oil refinery. It employed teams of commodity traders who bought and sold a wildly diverse menu of raw materials and financial products, from gasoline to paper futures contracts. This might have encouraged most CEOs to take their company public. Koch Industries, however, did not want outsiders to know how much money its traders were earning. Taking the company public would expose too many of its secrets. The memo said, certain of Koch's commodity traders are particularly worried that their high salaries, once disclosed to the public, would be used against them by their trading partners. Secrecy was a strategic necessity for Koch Industries. Charles Koch did not want to surrender it. He also didn't want to surrender control. He had a specific, clear vision of how to run his company, and he didn't need Wall Street investors to interfere. If the bankers expected Charles Koch to go along with the conventional wisdom of their time, then they, like so many outsiders, did not understand him. Beneath his low-key veneer, Charles Koch was, at his core, a fighter. He had unmovable ideas about how things should be, and he did not back down when challenged. When he was challenged by his own brothers for control of Koch Industries, he fought them in a bitter legal battle that lasted decades. When he was challenged by members of a powerful labor union during his first years as CEO, he fought them even as they committed an act of industrial sabotage that nearly destroyed Koch's oil refinery. When the FBI and the U.S. Department of Justice launched a criminal investigation into Koch Industries' oil gathering business, Charles Koch fought them with every legal and political tool at his disposal. When a liberal Congress and President Barack Obama sought to impose regulations on the fossil fuel industry to control greenhouse gas emissions, Charles Koch fought them in ways that changed U.S. politics. In each of these fights, Charles Koch prevailed. When Charles Koch dismissed the bankers in 1981, it was just a small skirmish in the larger war to control Koch Industries. After prevailing in that fight, he created a company that was true to his vision. He avoided the snares that entangled many publicly traded companies that report their financial results to investors every 3 months. Koch Industries didn't have to think quarter to quarter. The company thinks year to year. An internal think tank and deal-making committee called the Development Group will sometimes think through a business deal on a timeline measured in decades. This long-term view made Koch more nimble where other companies stumbled. In 2003, for example, Koch Industries bought a group of money-losing fertilizer plants when no publicly traded company was willing to take the risk. Today, those plants are as profitable as a broken ATM machine that spews out cash around the clock. Unlike publicly traded companies, Koch Industries does not pay out rich dividends to investors. Charles Koch insists on reinvesting at least 90% of the company's profits, fueling its constant expansion. This strategy laid the foundation for decades of continuous growth. Koch Industries expanded continuously by purchasing other companies and branching out into new industries. It specialized in the kind of businesses that are indispensable to modern civilization, but which most consumers never directly encounter. The company is embedded in the hidden infrastructure of everyday life. Millions of people use Koch's products without ever seeing Koch's name attached. Koch refines and distributes fossil fuels, from gasoline to jet fuel, on which the global economy is dependent. Koch is the world's third largest producer of nitrogen fertilizer, which is the cornerstone of our modern food system. Koch makes the synthetic materials used in baby diapers, waistbands, and carpets. It makes the chemicals used for plastic bottles and pipes. It owns Georgia Pacific, which makes the wall panels, beams, and plywood required to build homes and office buildings. It makes napkins, paper towels, stationery, newspaper, and personal hygiene products. Koch Industries owns a network of commodities trading offices in Houston, Moscow, Geneva, and elsewhere, which are the circulatory system of modern finance. The book, Kochland, by Christopher Leonard.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the second hour of our program. My op-ed today over at HartmannReport.com, my daily take, is titled How the Republican Party Became America's Ministry of Propaganda. And, I start out with this fascinating thing that scientists have learned, which is that if you hear something repeated multiple times, once it becomes familiar to you, you tend to believe in its truth. This is how the big lie works. This is, what Adolf Hitler himself wrote about in Mein Kampf. It's what Goebbels famously spoke about and wrote about, that if you, first of all, don't tell a small lie, tell a big lie, make it audacious. And secondly, if you repeat it enough, people will believe it. And the reason why, it turns out, is because our brains, at kind of an unconscious level, filter for truth. And the way that we determine truth is via familiarity. So this study published in Cognitive Research from a psychologist at the University of California in Georgia. Quote, repeated information is often perceived as more truthful than new information. This finding is known as the illusory truth effect, and it's typically thought to occur because repetition increases processing fluency. In other words, the more you hear something, the easier it is to repeat it, right? And to understand it. It's the same with learning a second language or learning new words in English. Back to the article. Because processing fluency and truth are frequently correlated in the real world, people learn to use processing fluency as a marker for truthfulness. So, the GOP has been using this now for 4 decades. For example, Reagan told us that tax cuts produce prosperity. Now, the London School of Economics looked at 18 wealthy OECD countries over 50 years and discovered, and I quote, we find that major reforms reducing taxes on the rich lead to higher income inequality. The effect remains stable in the medium term. In contrast, such reforms do not have any significant effect on economic growth and unemployment. End of quote. So in other words, it's a complete lie. Tax cuts do not produce prosperity. They produce income inequality. Period, full stop. Here's another lie from the Republicans. Immigrants bring crime. In fact, immigrants, both legal and undocumented, are far less likely to commit crimes than average American citizens. And the reason why is, fairly easy to understand. Hey, if you're in another country and you want to stay there and you want to have an opportunity ultimately to someday even become a citizen, the last thing you're going to do is blow that up by committing a crime. You went through a hell of a lot of work to get here. Another Republican lie. Increasing the minimum wage would worsen inflation. Here's the simple reality. The minimum wage was created in 1938. It has been raised 22 times in the years since then. If any one of those 22 years in the last 80 years when the minimum wage was raised, if any one of those years had shown an increase in inflation, every Republican would have that year memorized. They would say, oh, you don't want to increase the minimum wage because remember back in 1952 when we did and it caused inflation? They would have it memorized. But you have never heard a Republican point to a particular year when raising the minimum wage caused an increase in inflation because it never has. Here's another Republican lie. Union bosses are bleeding workers dry. Well, actually, it's the CEOs who are bleeding workers dry because they can control their own paychecks. Union bosses work on a salary. They have no incentive to take anything from workers the way CEOs do. They don't get more money if they can screw their people. They get reelected if they work for their people. It's just a naked lie. Here's another one. America's elections are corrupt. Well, it depends on how you define corrupt. I mean, if you're talking about Republicans purging people from the voting rolls, yeah, okay, I'll go along with that. But that's not what Republicans are talking about. They're trying to claim that, undocumented people are voting and people are voting 2 and 3 times. And these are just lies, just simple lies to justify laws that make it harder for old people, young people, women, married women, and people of color, poor people, basically. Not all people of color are poor, obviously, but poor people that in the minds of white Republicans are overrepresented by black people, to prevent them from voting. It's that simple. Here's another Republican lie. Guns will keep your home safe. Well, America now has 120 guns for 100 people. The average around the world is 20 guns per 100 people. We have more guns than people in the United States. And we are the only country in the world where the leading cause of childhood death
is gunshot wounds. A lie. It doesn't keep you safe. It increases the probability of homicide and suicide in your home if you have a gun in your home. Here's another lie. America is a Christian nation, Republican lie. America is a Christian nation as the founders intended. The founders did not intend America to be a Christian nation. Our first three presidents, George Washington refused at any time to claim that he was a Christian, and he was questioned about it repeatedly, as Jefferson pointed out. John Adams was a Christian, our second president, and open about it, a church-going Christian. But he never said that America was a Christian nation. In fact, he, in his correspondences with Thomas Jefferson, went off at length about how we were creating a secular government and it would be the downfall of our government if religion ever took over. And then, of course, Jefferson was one of the most outspoken of all of them. So, no, our founders did not think America was a Christian nation. The opposite, in fact. Here's another Republican lie. Global warming is junk science and CO2 is good for plants, so we need more of it. I mean, this is like the gun industry telling lies, right? This is just the fossil fuel industry. Here's another Republican lie. Republicans favor democracy around the world instead of dictatorships and are particularly tough on China. Really? Come on, give me a break. Remember 2019? This was just incredible. Remember Hong Kong? Hong Kong was standing up to China. And the one thing that was standing in the way that the Obama administration had said to China, if you crush dissent in Hong Kong, if you end democracy in Hong Kong, we are going to punish you. And so they didn't, even though China legally took over Hong Kong in 1999. But Trump came into office, and in 2019, he cut a deal with China where if they would give his daughter Ivanka trademarks and patents for her dresses and coffins and voting machines and a dozen other things, because she was trying to build a retail empire. If they would give her those trademarks, then Trump would let them take Hong Kong, destroy democracy in Hong Kong. And sure enough, they did it. Every one of these lies are vigorously promoted by the Republicans and by their aligned media. And the more often people hear them, sadly, Republicans hear them, the more they're believed. I mean, this is just so tragic. It's so destructive, frankly, to America and American democracy. But this is what's going on, and this is how it works. And this is why you can't expect Republicans to start telling the truth. Or Republican media, Fox so-called news, and these other right-wing media. They thrive on lies, and they know if they repeat the lie enough, it becomes truth in the minds of their viewers. And they don't care about reality. They only care about the perception of reality, because that's what people vote based on.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Meanwhile, is the FBI covering up the Epstein Files and movies? And Justice Sotomayor has something to say to us. I'll share those with you after the break. Stay with me. And welcome back. Charlotte in San Diego. Hey, Charlotte, what's on your mind today? Charlotte, watching Free Speech TV in San Diego, California.
Sorry, I had you on mute.
That's okay. What's up, Charlotte?
End of last week, you had a caller that talked about the homeowners insurance increase in Southern California. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to call you last week, but I couldn't. Didn't have time. Anyway, I wanted to say that our homeowners insurance exactly doubled since last year. And so now it's over $5,000 a year. Wow. And also, our lawyer who handles our estate and stuff, he told us that one of the tricks that the insurance companies are trying to use in California to not pay for the fire damage is they're saying that people that don't have their homes in their names, but the deed in their name, but they have it in a trust, that they'll say, we didn't sign up for insuring a trust. We signed up for Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so. So he advised us that we have to go to our insurance company and we have to tell them to add our names with the trust name on the policy to prevent that from happening. So that's one of the things they're trying to pull. I don't know how many people could be affected by that, but I'm sure there are some.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who have a little bit of wealth and they're trying to protect it with a trust. That's remarkable.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing I wanted to quickly say, I don't know for sure, but it looks like my Medicare has, not Medicare, Social Security check has been stopped. I won't know for sure until the 13th because my check-in is automatic deposit, and it can come anytime between the 8th and the 13th of the month. But usually, even if it comes on the 13th, I get it in advance that it's pending, and I've gotten nothing like that. And my only real big worry is if you have Medicare and you have auto deduct with your Social Security, or even if you don't, they take out your Medicare payment. Mm-hmm. So if they're not going to give me my Social Security, does that mean they're also not going to pay my Medicare bill?
Whoa, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know the answer to it, but that's, you would assume that a payment system that's paying you is probably also paying Medicare. And
yeah, that's how it's, I think, working, but
yeah.
I don't know.
Huh.
Yeah, so I mean, people may not only lose their Social Security, they may lose their health benefits.
Yeah, amazing.
Well, that's all I wanted to say, Tom. Thanks so much.
Good stuff, Charlotte. Thank you very much. That's remarkable. That's just remarkable. I don't have enough time right now to take another call because, you'd only have 20 seconds. So let me just share with you the remainder of Pope Leo's tweets. I didn't get through all of them before, and retweets. Here's one. We are one International Day for the elimination of racial... Oh, we are one International Day for the elimination of racial discrimination. He retweeted that. He retweeted the Laudato Si movement. This is the encyclical from Pope Francis affirming climate change and the need to fight climate change, which is, frankly, a pretty big deal. Here's another one. Catholic group to Illinois governor veto abortion funding bill. This is the one area where Pope Leo XIV is not particularly enlightened. He's still an opponent of abortion and an opponent of birth control. So, I mean, hey, is the Pope Catholic? Yeah. It is 18 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls and the news of the day in just a moment. Stay with us. Our daily song is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Tidal, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and a whole bunch of other platforms. Just look for songs by Louise and Thom Hartmann. Check it out. From Los Angeles to Columbia, South Carolina, from Birmingham, Alabama to Baltimore, universal basic income programs are chalking up proof after proof of their viability. Basically, just giving people, low-income people, poor people, somewhere between $500 and $1,500 a month, no strings attached, is lifting people out of poverty, getting them back on track, getting them into solid middle-class jobs, helping their children tremendously. This works. Now, we don't have to do UBI in the United States. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have a national health care program. Health expenses are whacking a lot of low-income people. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have free college education. Education expenses are whacking people. There's a lot we could do. We can subsidize housing. We can subsidize food. We do that with food stamps. We could expand it. There's a lot we could do to benefit from this. There's a whole report about that over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
Repeat it loud, repeat it long. That's how you turn the truth to wrong. He came down the golden stairs with a grin, sold the nation snake oil wrapped in sin, said the votes were fake, the news was too. Now the lies, the law, and the false feels true. Screens glow red in every home, echoes bouncing from the microphone, facts erased in a sea of noise, truth drowned out by a stolen voice. Welcome to America's Ministry of Propaganda, where Yeah, the louder you lie, the more they'll stand. Yeah, repeat it till the crowd forgets the truth was ever even said. This is how empires rot, from the inside, from the top.
Welcome back. 21 minutes past the hour. By the way, Trump this morning said, because they're meeting with China today to begin trade talks, right? And China's like, screw you guys. We're not doing nothing until, we're not even, going to have a serious conversation until you do away with these tariffs altogether. So Trump is like, well, please, Mr. Xi, if I reduce them down from 145 down to 80%, will you be nice to me? And I guarantee you, President Xi is going to say, tough. No, ain't gonna happen. Bite it. He's not gonna go along with it. China's in the catbird seat right now. Trump thinks he's so big and so tough, and he was gonna intimidate them. I'm telling you, this guy is losing it. He's losing his grip, which in my opinion makes it even more dangerous. Meanwhile, Pam Bondi was secretly recorded by James O'Keefe's group. They got this person to meet with Pam Bondi, who was apparently an au pair or a babysitter or something like that, and engaged, somebody that Bondi never thought would be a journalist or a reporter or somebody who would talk to the press or anything. And this woman was secretly recording Pam Bondi, our Attorney General. And Bondi was telling her that there are, quote, this is the verbatim quote, there are tens of thousands of videos of Epstein with children or child porn. Now, the MAGA people are all flipped out about Epstein because they're convinced that Epstein was in tight with Bill Gates and Bill Clinton. And both of them actually traveled on Epstein's plane and, maybe got a massage, as it were, right? In quotes. But Donald Trump lived down the street from Epstein in both New York and in Palm Springs. Or is it Palm Beach or Palm, whatever it is, wherever Mar-a-Lago, Palm Beach, but wherever Mar-a-Lago is. And so they're all, the MAGA people, particularly the QAnon people, they're like, we want to see all the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. And I guarantee you, well, I can't guarantee you, but in my opinion, Pam Bondi is withholding this stuff or going through and cleaning it all up because if these are actually films or videos of Epstein's male friends having sex with his underage girls, I'm guessing Donald Trump is all over those things because he was regularly with Epstein. He went to parties with him. He hung out at his house, both in Florida and in New York. They were best buds. So keep an eye on this. This could get interesting because, frankly, even though it's James O'Keefe, I doubt Fox News is going to pick this up, but we'll see. Who knows? And Judge Jeanine Pirro, Ms. Boxwine, has been nominated to replace Ed Martin, the Nazi-loving guy that Trump wanted to be the head prosecutor for D.C. The head prosecutor's job for D.C. is really consequential because that's the person who oversees and initiates the prosecution of crimes committed by the administration. The administration is in Washington, D.C., and so any crime that is committed in the White House or frankly in Congress has to be prosecuted, if it's being prosecuted at the state or federal level, in this case at the federal level, has to be prosecuted by the D.C. Attorney, U.S. Attorney. And so Trump wants Judge Boxwine, Jeanine Pirro, to be that prosecutor. 20 years she's been on Fox News. She was a prosecutor before, so at least she has, more credentials than Ed Martin did. Meanwhile, Sonia Sotomayor, the progressive member of the U.S. Supreme Court, one of the three, last night gave a speech, and she said, and I quote, "Our job is to stand up for people who can't do it themselves, and our job is to be the champion of lost causes. But right now, we can't lose the battles we are facing. We need trained and passionate and committed lawyers to fight this fight." She's obviously referring to Trump's assault on major law firms. Now, she's not the only one. John Roberts gave a speech in Buffalo, New York this week, where he said that judicial independence is necessary to, quote, check the excesses of Congress or the executive. Oh, really? The executive is engaged in excesses, Mr. Roberts? And then, of course, Ketanji Brown Jackson, earlier in the week condemned attacks on judges in her own speech. She didn't mention Trump by name, but she talked about the attack on democracy. I'm wondering if these guys on the Supreme, the fact that John Roberts is speaking the way he is, I'm wondering if we're going to start seeing a series of 5-4 or even 6-3 decisions where the liberals on the court are being joined by Amy Coney Barrett and John Roberts, and perhaps one of the others, unlikely, but perhaps one of the other four, and in defending our democracy. And then, you know, the other four are just out there, you know, gung-ho for fascism.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Interesting signs, tea leaves, smoke signals, whatever it is. Keep an eye on the Supreme Court. This is going to get fascinating. Your calls are up next. By Four Arrows, also known as Donald Jacobs or Don Jacobs. It's titled Point of Departure, Returning to Our More Authentic Worldview for Education and Survival. This is from Chapter 3, Community-Oriented Self-Authorship. Knowing the power of intentional and unintentional trance-based learning and how the latter can make us susceptible to believing untoward communication from authority figures, we can understand one reason self-authorship is important in the indigenous worldview. When we are in control of our thinking and trust our intuitive insights, our natural trance awareness helps prevent misdirection from external influences. It gives us the authority for what we can then instill in our minds to achieve. If someone such as a trusted shaman or psychologist has, certain skills at hypnosis, we might tentatively authorize him or her to help us form the most effective images, but we do so with full awareness. More important than avoiding negative influence from perceived authority figures, however, is the self-authorship via indigenous worldview that gives high degrees of individual autonomy to people while at the same time assuring that people use their freedoms to help their communities. In the indigenous worldview, the highest authority for all decisions comes from one's personal, honest reflection on lived experience with the understanding that everything is related. It is this understanding that makes a distinction between self-authorship, as it is generally perceived in the dominant worldview, and that of the indigenous one. Self-authorship is always ultimately in the service of the greater good in the latter. Self-authorship in indigenous ways of thinking comes from knowing that the highest experience for decisions comes from honest reflection on lived experience in light of realizing that everything is related in life, and this interconnectedness must be a part of all decisions. Michael Anthony Hart gets to these ideas about inner authority coming from such reflection. Through inward exploration, tapping into creative forces that run through all life, individuals come to subjectively experience a sense of wholeness. This exploration is an experience in context, where the context is the self in connection with happenings, and the findings from such experience is knowledge. Happenings may be facilitated through rituals or ceremonies that incorporate dreaming, visioning, meditation, and prayer. The findings from such experiences are encoded in community praxis as a way of synthesizing knowledge derived from introspection. Hence, indigenous peoples' cultures recognize and affirm the spiritual through practical applications of inner space, Such a holistic understanding of accessing, trusting, and exercising our inner authority is the source of the creativity and knowledge synthesis we need for addressing our global problems. While Ehrman refers to this inner authority with the Cree term mamatawisin, which is the capacity to tap the creative life forces of the inner space by the use of all the faculties that consume our being, it is to exercise inwardness. This understanding is missing from our dominant worldview, where objective-based outward exploration is sought for guidance rather than introspective knowledge development. Dependence on external authority is the rule in spite of the call to question authority that has always resonated on the fringes. Under the dominant worldview, obedience trumps community-oriented self-authorship. Decision-making is rarely a holistic process, nor does it utilize alternative states of awareness, deep reflection, and community praxis. The random quotations below, selected from an internet search, reveal that obedience to authority is common under the dominant worldview. Obedience to lawful authority is the foundation of manly characteristics, by Robert E. Lee. All religions have based morality on obedience, Alexander Herzen. Obedience brings peace in decision-making, James Faust. Justice is the insurance that we have on our lives and property. Obedience is the premium we pay for it, William Penn. I was not born to be free. I was born to adore and obey, C.S. Lewis. Every game has rules. Life's a game that has its respective rules. Obey the rules, win the game, Israel Ahavor. A wolf cannot have more than one head, or it tears itself apart, Con Iggulden. From a social dissident on the fringe, Noam Chomsky wrote, any dictator would admire the uniformity and obedience of the U.S. media. From an indigenous-raised Lakota, Oyessa, the American Indian was an individualist in religion as in war. Reliance on external authority is not only the bedrock of choices in mainstream society and the main approach to moral development, but it also gives guides jurisprudence and conflict resolution. Authorized punishment or revenge is a primary goal for wrongdoing. Under indigenous worldview, bringing offenders back into community via affected members of the community is the goal. This relational approach expands the circle of land and seeks input from the wide circle of relevant people. Spiritual resources are employed via prayer or song, and subjectivity is as important as objectivity. Hart emphasizes this relationship as emphasizing spirit and spirituality, and in turn, a sense of communitism and respectful individualism. And then he goes on about the indigenous worldview and how it relates to what we would call communism. Point of departure by 4 arrows.
Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. A lot of people wonder, where did this whole right-wing movement to basically gut our freedoms and end DEI and all this other, where did this all begin? It all started back in 1951 with a book called The Conservative Mind, From Burke to Eliot by Russell Kirk. And he argued that if the middle class ever got too big, you'd see young people and women and racial minorities all get up on their hind feet and start protesting and basically screwing up America. And in the 50s, even Republicans thought he was nuts. But then the 60s happened and all those protests, and suddenly Republicans thought, yeah, he's right. We've got to destroy the middle class, or at least cut it back. And that was Reagan's mandate when he came into office in 1981. There's a whole article about this. You can read all the details. It's titled The GOP's 60-Year Conspiracy to Kill Our Democracy. None dare call it treason, but I will. Over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
There's poison in the sky and silence on the floor. The rich men smile while the children cough more. They sold our breath for a pipeline's black gold. They signed the death deals with hands ice cold. Now breathing's not a birthright, it's a battlefield map. Welcome to the front lines, where truth wears a gas mask. Breathing is now a political act. They weaponize the wind, now we're under attack. If you want your kids to run and laugh, better fight like hell for clean air back. This ain't just policy, it's a pact. You can breathe, or you can let them take that. Yeah, breathing is now an act.
Welcome back. 36 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here on Anything Goes Weekend. John in Minneapolis. Hey, John, what's up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I would say that Donald Trump exemplifies a gospel of hate, and we should think of that. I mean, the things that he says and the things that his administration does is the antithesis of how a Christian should act. And I don't know, I think it was the Washington Post said that he lied 30,000 times.
Yeah.
And, the country was, in his last term, that doesn't count the lies that he's, doing right now. And, I'm a real believer in the separation of church and state, only because people have free will. And in religious regimes, where like the Taliban, they have absolutely no choice. And it really destroys religion. It also destroys the state. It's not a good idea, and that's why our founding fathers, after years and years of wars in Europe where people were slaughtered for their religious beliefs, they said, well, this is just, we're going to start something new here. And I would say that in the 20th century, I mean, you could see, the Nazis and the fascists and what they did to religion within the countries that they operated in, like in Portugal, Spain, and Italy, and then even, in Germany, although they had a more secular bent to their evil philosophy or whatever you want to call it. But authoritarianism and the merger of church and state, those things are they're horror. It's just a horror that will resonate and last over literally centuries. People will not forgive what the church has done to them, like in Spain, in northern Spain. I just watched a film about Guernica and what happened there, and Franco just offered up this town to the Germans to experiment in blitzkrieg. It's just a horror that just is not undone. And I would say the same with the mixing of religion and the modern state of Israel, and then calling Zionism part of Judaism, which it's not. And there's a lot of Jews within Israel who really decry that and are very marginalized in Israeli society in Jerusalem there, and constantly picked on. But it's just not a good idea. It's not a good idea, what's going on in Russia with the Patriarch of Moscow being in bed with Putin. This kind of thing. It's even worse than what happened with the Tsar. And we should learn our lesson from history. And
I absolutely get it, John. And I agree with you. And this is why John Adams and James Madison, two of our four first presidents, of course, Washington and Jefferson were deists. They were not even Christians. Adams and Madison were both Christians, and they both spoke out forcibly against this merger of church and state. John, thank you for the call. Jason in Simsbury, Connecticut. Hey, Jason, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Before I get to my point, knowing that you have a big contingency in Chicago, if you haven't seen some of the humor coming out with the new Pope, his first couple acts are going to be reintroducing good pizza to Rome and eliminating hot dogs, or eliminating ketchup on hot dogs. Right. So that's kind of some of the points as a former Chicagoan. But to my point, this June 14th rally, parade, whatever that he's got planned, which I don't know if he's necessarily going to go through, but I think probably because he's gutted the military of people that are saying no tanks in the streets.
Yeah.
Is this an opportunity to kind of make a stand of almost to a level of a Tiananmen Square, to where people are sitting down, protesting in the streets that the tanks are not going to come through here? And do you think that the protesting people like myself are willing to go so far to say, we're going to play chicken with you guys?
Well, that's an interesting question, Jason. I have no idea. I've not heard anything or seen anything. I've not received anything suggesting that there will be any kind of action to try to disrupt the parade. I'm guessing that anybody who does will be dealt with very, very harshly. We have an authoritarian regime running the country right now. We'll have to wait and see. But
I kind of see it as like maybe that's kind of the breaking point of like if we're willing to stand up, this is our opportunity, and it's an event like that that's going to say no, we're not doing this any further.
Yeah, I would be very, very careful in advising people to do that because they will be dealt with in ways that might, basically destroy the future of their lives. These guys are playing for keeps. When you're dealing with fascists like this. There are times when, standing up, speaking out, even being a martyr for the cause is an appropriate thing. We certainly saw that in the American Revolution. You see that, in people protesting dictatorships around the world. On the other hand, it's a hell of a price to pay. So I don't know. We'll see.
I agree.
We'll see.
And moving to Connecticut and knowing the history, Nathan Hale was the youngest revolutionary fighter, and his name is plastered all over the state as somebody who sacrificed to that extent.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying like we're trying to be martyrs and going that far, but it may get to the point where it takes that level of sacrifice.
Yeah, I get it. We'll see. Hey, Jason, thanks for the call. Emily in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Emily, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I wanted to tell you, I'm a retired librarian, and I was horrified to hear about Carla Hayden. It's an outrage, but it's, of course, not surprising. But the other funny thing, and my sister gave me this little tip, apparently Pope Leo's mother was a librarian, which I think is terrific.
And his father was a
and
teacher.
His father, that's right. So I don't expect him to be a champion of gay rights, but anyway, some of his other qualities look encouraging.
Yeah, the gay
And then
rights
the other
thing
thing-
seems to be up in the air. Nobody's really sure where he stands on that.
Yeah, I'm not real optimistic, but I suppose I could be surprised.
Yeah.
But the other thing I was going to say, I was listening to a sports podcast, believe it or not, that got political, and one of the guys said something very interesting, and I thought this is a good weapon. He said, well, 30% of the voters in this country are pro-cancer, because they voted for a guy who cut cancer research. He says, so I can only assume that these people think cancer is okay. Yeah. And if you get it, oh, well, sorry, Charlie, tough luck.
Yep.
It's your fault you got cancer. So I just thought, well, that's pretty true. That's who these people are. Just die already. That's their motto. If you're sick, if you're poor, if you're old, just die and save us a lot of money, right?
Well, yeah, this goes back to Jamie Raskin, on the floor of the House. I believe it was Jamie Raskin. No, it wasn't. It was the congressman from Florida who's been on our program a couple times, and his name is escaping me right now, who went on the floor of the House with a kind of a series of cards, of billboards, and he said, the new Republican plan, if you get sick, just die. Right? Just die quickly.
Right. Is that Moskowitz?
No. He's no longer in Congress, and I'm sorry.
He's no longer in Congress.
Yeah, I can't remember his name.
No, that's their whole attitude. They're the party of cruelty, and they just want people to not inconvenience them and not waste, quote unquote, waste their money.
Right. And if you do need medical help, if you do have a serious condition, visit your health food store. Right, this is the new message. Just go take some vitamins.
Yeah.
Emily, thanks for the call. Good talking to you. 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It was Alan Grayson who said, the new Republican health plan, don't get sick. And if you do get sick, die quickly. And welcome back. Dr. Appleby in Gulf Shores, Alabama. Hey, Doc, what's up?
Well,
I ran for county commissioner almost 2 decades ago, not in Alabama, in another state.
Mm-hmm.
And, I noticed that, how do a lot of people vote based on name recognition? Well, if I say I'm running for school board, how do I get name recognition? Well, I advertise.
Mm-hmm.
How do I advertise? Well, I got to get some money to do that, so I have to get donations. So before I'm even elected to office, I've already sold myself. I don't know what the answer is. Well, I think one thing is print media, like internet, we really don't have newspapers anymore, but if they would say you have a slate of candidates and some journalist makes a list. Okay, these are the candidates for this seat. This is something about their history, instead of forcing every voter to go do their own research. Mm-hmm. That might help. I don't know. I would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah,
but
I think
before I listen to...
Well, go ahead. I was going to say, I think the key to it is to get big money out of politics. And then the second step in that is to have public financing of elections. So so I believe it's Washington State that gives everybody $50 that they can give to a member of, who's running for re-election. Yeah, it might be a tax deduction or a tax credit. I don't recall how they do it, but, those kind of things work.
Well, that's kind of like electoral voting. It's going to be kind of hard to change that when the people we want to change it benefited from it. But one more point I want to make is I have started to get, for my legislators, I've called their offices because they don't put it on their website, and get their fax numbers. Because if I call, or even if I write a letter, unless I send it certified mail, I have no proof.
Right. No, you can send a fax to most members of Congress, and that's a very, very efficient way to deliver a written missive to them.
But getting their fax numbers, all three of my legislators, my 2 senators and my congressperson, their fax numbers are not listed.
Oh,
so,
really?
Anyway, that was my comment.
So you have to call the office and get the fax numbers.
Yeah.
Amazing. I got to move along, Dr. Appleby. I'm sorry, but thank you for the call, and your points are well made. Tony in Nashville, Tennessee. Hey, Tony, what's on your mind today?
Well, I actually had a couple of topics we could talk about. I'm going to let you choose your own adventure.
We have 44 seconds. Pick one.
Oh, well, okay, let's talk about the fact that you were about 40 minutes ago saying that trickle-down economics clearly and demonstrably does not work. You are correct. I think a lot of our governors and mayors are unaware that they have the ability to completely reverse all federal-level trickle-down economic policies. Because basically the policy is just let's not tax rich people. And so what you could do if you are the mayor or if you are the governor of a state is just have a local or state income tax with a negative bracket at the bottom, which is just as good as having a universal basic income, but much cheaper to operate. 4% tax in the middle, and then a progressively higher tax rate on income above whatever percentile seems appropriate.
Yeah. Well, there's some places that are doing that, Tony. Here in Multnomah County, if you earn over, I think it's $250,000 a year, there's a substantial tax that's used to pay for homeless programs in the county. So, step by step, it's happening. Tony, I got to run, but thanks for the call. Very thoughtful comment. I appreciate it. It is 49 minutes past the hour. Stick around. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Back in 1968, when Lyndon Johnson was president, Earl Warren resigned from the Supreme Court. He was a liberal, even though he had been appointed by Eisenhower. Johnson wasn't able to replace him, in part because of Republican opposition in the Senate. And so when Nixon came in, he had this opening, but he wanted to have 2 openings. He wanted to get rid of Abe Fortas, who was the most liberal member of the court. So he had his Attorney General, John Mitchell, start an investigation into Abe Fortas's wife. Now, there was nothing there. There was no smoke at all. She had done absolutely nothing wrong, and history has proven that. But they were going to drag her before a grand jury and possibly before Congress and just, drag her through the mud.
And this caused Abe Fortas to resign, and that gave Nixon 2 openings, and that's how the court turned to the right. I'm suggesting that Democrats should do the same thing with Justice Thomas. I've got an op-ed about it at Hartmann Report. You can read it over there. Check it out.
I was tangled in the headlines, caught up in the noise. The weight of the world had stolen my joys. I grabbed my coat, left my phone behind. Told myself it's time to unwind. The city fades as the highway bends. The air turns clean where the pavement ends. Go find your mountain, your valley, your stream, where the air feels lighter and your soul can dream. When the world feels heavy, let it all fall away. There's peace in the wild where the trees softly sway.
52 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Anything Goes weekend. Joe in Seattle. Hey, Joe, what's up?
Oh, good Friday, Tom. How you doing?
Good. What's up?
Well, I tend to. I was researching the French Revolution of 1787, and you know the saying. I think that most people know the saying that history tends to repeat itself. Greed and corruption of governments on all parties. It's almost a carbon copy of what I feel is going on in America in the last 20 to 30 years. And I was curious of your opinion.
Well, I'm not a scholar of the French Revolution. I'm familiar with Maximilian and Robespierre, Maximilian Robespierre and the terrors. That didn't start until the early 1790s, though, did it?
Right. And, you know, Dwight Eisenhower did in 1961 warned us of the military complexes and how they would corrupt the government.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel that.
Finish your thought.
I feel it's a repeat of history.
Yeah.
You know, is to be.
Yeah, you know, I think it was Mark Twain who said history doesn't necessarily repeat, but it rhymes. And yeah, there's a lot to be learned from that. I'm going to have to do a little more research on the French Revolution to you know, opine in a meaningful or thoughtful way about whether or not there's any parallels between that and today. I mean, you know, Louis was the 14th. Was, you know, pretty awful guy, and his wife wasn't much better. So, you know, on the other hand, look at what we've got in the White House. I don't think that the guillotines are coming, though. I really don't. Joe, thanks for the call. Good talking to you. Larry in Los Angeles. Hey, Larry. What are the latest numbers in your mind today?
Oh, I'm just thinking about how our entire system has changed and how the Republicans have tilted the landscape such that everything favors the Republicans now. And you have the mainstream media, you have the Federal Reserve, the Supreme Court. Everything favors the Republicans.
Social media.
It's actually amazing. Social media. And now AI, which I like to call imitation intelligence.
Yeah. Well, Musk is training his Grok AI on Twitter itself. He's using, so I'm guessing that his AI is going to end up being pretty Nazi-oriented.
Yeah, and so we have a situation now where lies are the current most profitable commodity in our country. And what makes it so profitable also is because the Chinese and the Russians recognize this, that these lies are actually making us weaker, and so they promote them and promote the Republican Party as they try to destroy us.
You are
the Republicans
right.
And the Republicans in America they're okay with that because it gives them power. They really don't care about the health of this country. They just want to be in control.
Yeah. Yeah, they want their hand in the till. They want the money. They want the power. You're absolutely right, Larry.
The tax cuts. And we used to be taught that the boy who cried wolf, eventually people wouldn't listen to him anymore. Donald Trump has this entire country hanging on every word, every lie that he's ready to tell us. Cheaters never prosper. That's no longer in effect anymore. We don't even teach that, apparently. I rarely ever hear it. And the Bible tells us that liars are not welcome in the new kingdom. Donald Trump. So and I had reported to you that a Fed chairman, and not chairman, but a Fed official had been arrested. His name is John Harold Rogers. I haven't heard anything. That was in January. I don't know where his case stands right now, but he was arrested for giving the Chinese information that could move our markets. And he started doing that when Trump.
I remember that.
And he started doing that when Trump was president, and then he did it all the way through the Biden administration. And then I called the FBI, and they arrested him.
Wow.
And so, but I suspect that Trump will not prosecute this guy. I suspect he'll give him a pardon.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I'm sure you're on it, Larry. Larry, thanks for the heads up, and thanks for the call. It's always nice hearing from you. I appreciate it. And we'll be back on the other side of the break with more of the news of the day. What is Trump even doing anymore? And his new threat, it's going to keep the internet out of reach for millions, but it might mean billions for Elon Musk. I'll tell you about that right after the break.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Unsettling Truths, the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the doctrine of discovery by Mark Charles and Soon Chan Ra. This is from chapter 1. You cannot discover lands that are already inhabited. I, Mark, said this almost under my breath as I walked past a line of men dressed as Spanish sailors from the 1490s. I was in front of Union Station in Washington, D.C., near the massive statue of Christopher Columbus overlooking the United States Capitol. Every Columbus Day, there's an official ceremony in this plaza honoring Columbus as the discoverer of America. I had stumbled upon this ceremony by accident the year prior. There were a few non-natives holding signs and protesting the ceremony, but nothing very disruptive. I went back the following year primarily out of curiosity. I wasn't intending to protest, nor did I want to make a scene. As I walked up behind the statue and approached the group of men dressed as Spanish sailors, the words just came out of my mouth. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I walked further down the line, I said it again, this time a little louder. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I continued walking, I came to the front of the line where a group of men dressed in suits were standing. I repeated myself, making sure they could hear me. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. Suck it up, was the reply I heard as I kept walking. By this time, I'd walked around the statue and reached the front where a small stage had been erected and chairs set up for people to watch the ceremony. It hadn't started yet, but more than half the audience was seated waiting for it to begin. So I stopped near the center, turned toward the crowd, and in a calm but loud voice I said to the people, "You cannot discover lands already inhabited. That process is known as stealing, conquering, or colonizing. The fact that America calls what Columbus did discovery reveals the implicit racial bias of the country, that Native Americans are not fully human." Quickly, one of the white men dressed in a suit walked over and interrupted me. "You are not welcome here," he said as he grabbed my arm and began walking me away. I attempted to explain the inappropriateness of both celebrating this holiday as well as hosting this ceremony, but instead of engaging in conversation, he threatened me with arrest and escorted me from the area. As I walked away from the gathering, I was amused at his words and the irony of their context. A white man participating in a public ceremony honoring Christopher Columbus as the discoverer of America, telling a native man he was not welcome in that space. How did a flawed assumption about the place of the indigenous population in U.S. society become normative? How are assumptions so deeply ingrained in the American psyche and imagination that dysfunctional and oppressive actions emerge? How did a dysfunctional idea and worldview form that allows for the displacement of native bodies? One of the explanations for the formation of this dysfunctional worldview is the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery is a set of legal principles that governed the European colonizing powers, particularly during the administration of indigenous land, regarding the administration. It is the primary legal precedent that still controls native affairs and rights, and international law formulated in the 15th and 16th centuries. From a theological perspective, the legal and political role of the doctrine of discovery is rooted in a dysfunctional theological imagination that shaped the European colonial settler worldview. The doctrine emerged from a series of 15th century papal bulls, which are official decrees by the Pope that carry the full weight of his ecclesiastical office. On June 18, 1452, Pope Nicholas V issued the papal bull Dum Diversus, which initiated the first set of documents that would compose the doctrine of discovery. The official decree of the Pope granted permission to King Alfonso V of Portugal, quote, to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens, Muslims, and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ wheresoever placed, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods whatsoever, held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to apply and appropriate to himself and his successors the kingdoms, dukedoms, counties, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his or their use and profit. End of quote from Pope Nicholas's papal bull of 1452. Dum Diversus would identify the Saracens, a common term for Muslims at the time, and pagans, essentially identifying any non-Christians as others, as those who could be targeted for, quote, perpetual slavery. The papal bull intentionally used language that identified those outside the European Christian world and enforced the Western theological imagination of non-Europeans as other. The Portuguese took these ecclesiastical statements to heart and perpetrated the slave trade from the African continent to the European and the American continents. As a Christian ruler, the King of Portugal would have power endowed from the church to take possession of the other as slave labor from the continent of Africa. The pagan African body was just another commodity to be taken for the pleasure and profit of the European Christian body, the one made most fully in the image of God. In the January of 1454, Pope Nicholas authored another bull. The book is Unsettling Truths by Charles and Ra.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the third hour of our program. A federal judge has ordered that the Tufts University candidate, Rumeysa Öztürk, a Turkish foreign exchange student, who was arrested by masked, plainclothes federal agents outside her Boston apartment back in March, and has been held in a prison ever since then. She committed the horrible crime of co-authoring an op-ed for the Tufts University student newspaper a year ago that criticized Netanyahu's bombing the crap out of Gaza. That is now a crime in the United States for which you can be put in prison. She was imprisoned for several months. And a federal judge said, "What the hell are you people doing?" Well, he didn't absolutely say that. He said, "There's absolutely no evidence that she has engaged in violence or advocated violence. She has no criminal record. She has done nothing other than essentially attend her university and expand her contacts within the community in such a supportive way." Good person. But hey, she pissed off Netanyahu, and that's enough for Trump to go after her, right? Autocrats got to stick together. Meanwhile, this is an interesting piece. Chris Truax, writing over at The Hill, noting that Trump's impulsive ideas don't make any sense. He writes, the president doesn't know what the Declaration of Independence is. He was last week, because he just had the Declaration of Independence posted in his Oval Office. And so somebody said, well, what is the Declaration of Independence to you? And he said, oh, it's a love letter. It's an expression of love. Well, actually, it was a declaration of war against the United Kingdom. And a long list of grievances. There was no love in there at all. So Trump obviously has never read the Declaration of Independence and never paid attention in any elementary school, middle school, high school, or college class in which the history of our nation was discussed. I mean, he literally doesn't know what the Declaration of Independence is. And now he's got this trade war with China, where he just, randomly says, China says, well, if you put tariffs on us, we'll put tariffs on you. And Trump says, okay, 145%, drop that. And he just pulls it out of his backside. I mean, this is just there's no rationale for it. There's no justification. There's no math. It's just, and the result, of course, is going to be that we're going to slide into a recession this summer. And I think it's going to be a pretty severe one. But maybe there's something even more substantial going on here. Now, again, this is this op-ed over at The Hill. He says the ravages of old age can take many forms. Trump is losing whatever inhibitions he had, along with his judgment, pushing for Alcatraz and saying, movies should be tariffed. Well, movies are considered services as opposed to goods. And we could debate that, but that's the category that they fall into, intellectual property. And we don't tax intellectual property at all anywhere. We export most of it. In fact, the countries that have a trade, with whom we have a trade surplus, it's in those kind of things. It's in financial services, it's in software, it's in, Facebook, it's in, that kind of stuff. Movies, things like that. His lying about Kilmar Garcia having MS-13 on his knuckles. His discussion about, well, little girls should just have $3 or 5 pencils. I mean, Grandpa Trump is becoming a menace. He's 78 years old. I mean, this is the age where you start to ask, should Grandpa's car keys be taken away from him? And so, there's this growing number of commentators who are pointing this out. Now, I would point out to them and to you that this is nothing new. People call into the program and they go, oh, Trump is going senile. Trump has got dementia. Trump has Alzheimer's. I don't think so. I think Trump's mind is actually working pretty much the way it always has. He's always had terrible judgment. He cheated on all 3 of his wives. His best friend was Jeffrey Epstein. In fact, he may have been his only friend for years and years. He consistently, year after year after year, committed tax fraud and insurance fraud, knowingly.
The guy has been convicted of 34 felonies. He's been charged with many others. His businesses have been convicted of crimes. But I think most telling is you just look at his business history. You know, Trump Steaks, Trump Vodka, Trump Board Game, you know, Trump Airlines, Trump Water, Trump Ice, the list just goes on and on and on. I mean, you know, he's Trump University. He has started probably 30 or 40 businesses. The Trump 6 Trump casinos that all failed. Every single one of them. They were spectacular failures. Because he does things on impulse. He doesn't think them through. He doesn't think about the consequence. He doesn't ask the question. I mean, I get it, being a serial entrepreneur, right? I have started 7 or 8 businesses in my life, maybe even 9. Several of them did not succeed. One failed spectacularly. It was one of my very first businesses was called the Electronics Giant. It was a TV repair shop in East Lansing that Louise and I started in 1968 when I was 17 years old. And maybe it was 69. And it was right across the street from Michigan State University. I was living just on that same block in a little one-room room. And I grew it up to the point where we had 5 employees, and then I killed it. I mean, you know, we just grew too fast. We expanded too fast. And, you know, frankly, this was during the transition from vacuum tubes to integrated circuits and things, and I just underestimated the reliability of integrated circuits. But that's a whole other story. My point is, every time and 5 of our businesses were very successful and made lots of money. But the point is, every time you start a business, you have to go through due diligence. You have to ask yourself, you know, how is this going to work? What are the things that could stop us? How do we maximize the probabilities of success? Trump never does any of that stuff. He's just like, oh yeah, let's start a board game with Donald Trump. Let's sell Trump ties. That's a great idea. Let's sell Trump handkerchiefs. I mean, you know, he's just. And finally, he got a grift that actually works, which is politics. And now he's got this crypto grift going that apparently has made him several $billion already. He's monetizing the White House. But he's been a grifter his whole entire life, but he's also been this impulsive. I think what's going on is that Trump is just deeply and profoundly incompetent. He's never been good at running anything in his whole entire life. And the few successes he's had, if you want to call them successes, if you want to call running a business that's essentially a criminal enterprise that was committing tax fraud and insurance fraud for decades, his real estate empire, if you want to call that a success, the only reason that it was a success was because he had Alan Weisselberg and Michael Cohen working for him, who ran the damn business. And I'm forgetting the woman's name. But he had a woman who was also running his business for him, who has since come out and kind of dished dirt on him. So I'm not surprised by any of this. And I think that we have to prepare for the worst, that he's going to screw up everything he touches, him and Musk. And, Musk posits that he's, some great intellectual, some, profound deep thinker and inventor. He didn't invent Tesla. He bought it from 2 guys. And the only reason it became a success was because Barack Obama loaned them a bunch of government money. I mean, same with pretty much every company he's got. And I just think these guys, they're tearing our government apart. They've fired a couple 100,000 federal employees, most of them black people, or many of them. I think that their racism is the primary thing that's animating this, and now he's off on this immigration jag, and let's throw brown-skinned people in jail. I don't think any of it's going to work. It's a disaster. It's destroying America's reputation around the world. One day he's pro-Ukraine, the next day he's anti-Ukraine, one day he's pro-Russia, the next day he's just, yesterday he was talking about let's tax the rich. He doesn't intend to do it. In fact, he said Republicans shouldn't do this. Well, why did he say it? Because he knows that his base wants the rich taxed. So he's going to say the words because he knows the perception, or he believes Perception is more important than reality. He knows that it'll be aggressively reported by right-wing media. Hey, Trump wants to tax rich people. And then people will say, well, maybe we should like him after all. It's just breathtaking. And I we're seeing it right now. I was just going to say, I think it's going to really harm America. You don't have to imagine that or think that. It is harming America right now, right here. This is not a good thing. This is not healthy. But here we are. We're stuck with him for a while. So let's make the best of it, and let's get out there and protest on June 14th. I'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Taking back the mainstream media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. I'll be right back with your calls. And welcome back. Chris in Littleton, Colorado. Hey, Chris, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, good morning, Tom. Renewable energy is the solution to climate change disaster.
I agree.
It's the cheapest and most job-producing and most abundant energy on the planet.
Oh, it's amazing. Okay. We had solar panels put on our roof last fall, and I am no longer buying electricity from the power company. Starting about a week or so ago, my bill is going to zero, and it'll stay there until probably September or October. I mean, it's just, and I've got all this surplus that I'm selling back to the power company. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and I'm at the National Renewable Energy Labs in Golden, Colorado, with a protest group because Elon Musk and the con man and liar and thief T-Rump they're cutting jobs.
Yeah.
They're cutting the scientists and researchers that come up with new and better, renewable energy. They're cutting the jobs here.
Yeah, but that they're not going to stop it. I mean, it is so obvious to so many people. I mean, what's so ironic is that several of the states that are the leading states for adoption of solar and wind power are red states. Texas, Oklahoma. You've got several states that are Nebraska. Several states that are just like, they're building windmills and putting up solar panels just as fast as they can. And it's not happening with, a lot of assistance from the states. This is the marketplace at work. Because, people like me, people who can afford to put some solar panels on their houses or put up a windmill or local power companies and things, they're all jumping on the bandwagon.
It's a perfect solution for everybody.
Yeah, it really is. Chris, thanks for the call, and thanks for pointing all that out. Well said. Scott in Portland. Hey, Scott, what's on your mind today?
Hey, everybody. Belated happy birthday to you, Tom, and to Sean. My birthday is on the 6th as well, so that's not why I called. Something very distressing that I think we need to pay attention to. About 2 weeks ago, Humpty Dumpty signed an executive order to promote seabed mining, and which is a terrible, terrible thing. I would reference two excellent articles in Scientific American, which are both available online. One was September 2023, and that's about the polymetallic nodules, which are these, softball-sized aggregates of metals, nickel and cobalt and so on. And the other one is the current issue, which is this month, May. And it's a reporter got on board a ship that was taking samples off of the coast of Papua New Guinea, and it's a company that called Deep Sea Mining Finance, or they're funded by them, and they're registered in BVI in British Virgin Islands, so there's no oversight there, and it's all funded by, get this, Russia and Omani money.
Really?
And yeah, a little connection there to back to Humpty Dumpty. But it's really, but for a good thing, Google spruce trees and solar eclipse. That'll put a smile on your face.
Okay, I'll try. I'll check it out.
Spruce trees.
Spruce trees and solar eclipse. You got it.
Communicate to each other as an eclipse occurs.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm familiar with that. Scott, thank you. Thanks for the call, and thanks for listening to X-Ray FM. We'll be right back. Our daily song is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Tidal, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and a whole bunch of other platforms. Just look for songs by Louise and Thom Hartmann. Check it out. Back in 2010, when Viktor Orban took over the Fidesz party in Hungary, that party was sort of like the Republican Party. It was just a conventional conservative European political party. And he has turned it into a neo-fascist powerhouse. He pushed through he altered the nation's constitution to push through what we would call gerrymandering and voter suppression so that his party will always win. He campaigned on building a wall. Build a wall was literally one of his campaign slogans, and he did build a wall across the southern border of Hungary to keep out Syrian refugees who were fleeing the violence when Russia was bombing that country. His other two campaign slogans were, and I quote, "Restore Christian purity and make Hungary great again." Seriously, back in 2010, 6 years before Trump. There's an amazing backstory about how Viktor Orban is being cloned, essentially, in the GOP. You can find the article over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
Oh, Canada, you packed your snow and pride. Said, no thanks, Donald, we won't let you inside. We used to share maple and trust across the line. Now you're eyeing us like Alaska in '59. Mark Carney stepped up with a banker's grin. No trade deals with fascists, we won't let you win. He warned the crowd with a voice so clear. America wants our forests, our water, our beer. Oh, Canada, our friends so true. We used to play fair, now we're ghosting you. You sent us syrup, we sent you smog. But Trump came along and fed you to the fog. Now you're locking your borders and shutting your gate. Guess being neighbors ain't the same when your buddy's full of hate in your...
Back 23 minutes past the hour. So Elon Musk, let me start this over. So Joe Biden signed this legislation. It was called the Digital Equity Act. And it probably shouldn't have put the word equity in the title because it caused Donald Trump to think it had something to do with black people. And Elon Musk, too, he's all hysterical about this. Well, Elon Musk has his own issues. What the Digital Equity Act did was allocate federal dollars to provide subsidies for people in areas where there is no high-speed broadband to get high-speed broadband. Now, principally, these are white people in rural America. Like the vast majority of them. You know, there's pretty much not an urban area in America where you cannot get high-speed, digital broadband. The program would have provided some subsidies, some support to very poor people who didn't have access to internet. But there's also a lot of charities and nonprofits that are doing that same thing. But mostly it would have provided high-speed, broadband to people in rural America. But it says Digital Equity Act, and so it was like, oh my God, equity, that has something to do with black people, doesn't it? And this was $2.75 billion in federal grants. It was passed by Congress. It was signed by President Biden. And so then Donald Trump comes out yesterday and posts on his Nazi-infested social media site. He says, I have spoken with my wonderful Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, and we agree that the Biden-Harris so-called Digital Equity Act is totally unconstitutional. No more woke handouts based on race. The Digital Equity Program is a racist, illegal, $2.5 billion giveaway. I'm ending this immediately and saving taxpayers billions of dollars. Now, actually, he's not quite ending it. It appears that what he's doing is he's saying
That $2.5 billion, instead of giving that to Comcast to bring, or Verizon or T-Mobile to bring high-speed broadband to poor people or to remote rural areas, let's give it to Starlink. Yeah, let's give it to our buddy Elon. After all, he made us president, right? And he's threatening members of Congress with primary challenges if they don't go along with the administration. So let's make him even richer. Let's give Elon that $2.5 billion. At least that's what it appears like. It's remarkable. This is Free Press Action's CEO Craig Aaron says the Trump administration is spiking plans spent years developing to help their own residents in favor of trying to redirect billions into Elon Musk's pockets via his Starlink internet satellite service. It's a sort of government graft seizing resources from the public and awarding them to Trump loyalists, which has come to typify this White House. Right. Amazing. So what's on your mind? Anything Goes weekend. Picking up your calls right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's the place where smart people get their news. I'll be right back with your calls. Stay with us. America by Sarah Churchwell, The Entangled History of America First and the American Dream. This is from the prologue. On Monday, 30 May 1927, a cool day with showers forecast, New Yorkers were gathering for the annual Memorial Day parades around the city. It was only 9 years since the end of the European War, into which America had been so reluctantly drawn and Europe had suddenly become closer than ever before. Precisely 10 days earlier, Charles Lindbergh had completed the first solo flight across the Atlantic in the spirit of St. Louis, and no one had yet stopped celebrating. Front pages around the country reported that Lucky Lindy had been mobbed in London, greeted by rapturous crowds of 150,000. Few Americans were talking about much else than the newest national hero, but in New York that day, different kinds of mobs were about to gather. Around 8 a.m., a group of Italian immigrants living in the Bronx set out for the elevated train on their way to Manhattan to join the parade. But they were not going to honor the American soldiers who had died in the service of their country. They were supporters of Mussolini, planning to join 400 American fascists who were marching in Manhattan's Memorial Day parade as part of the official fascist movement in the United States. They had been invited by the parade's organizers, to the outrage of many anti-fascists, including Italian nationalists and anarchists who threatened violence if the invitation wasn't rescinded. It wasn't. Like all his fellow fascists intending to march that day, Joseph Carisi was wearing the black shirt uniform, sporting leather boots, jodhpurs, a black cap, and carrying a steel-tipped riding crop. When he stopped to buy a newspaper, Carisi was jumped by two men, stabbed in the neck, and left to die on the sidewalk. Another fascist, Nicholas Amoroso, who was running either to catch up with his group or away from the killers, reports vary, was shot 4 times, once right through the heart. One of the two murdered men had served in the American Army during the Great War, the other with the Italian Army, papers reported. The parade they had meant to join took place without them, a fascist delegation of several hundred that was guarded by police to, quote, avert disorder. After the parade, the American blackshirts returned to their headquarters in the heart of Times Square. There, another of the fascists standing outside was set upon by 3 men. He defended himself with his riding crop as his fellow blackshirts charged out brandishing clubs and whips, chasing the assailant through the theater traffic in Times Square, who fled as the black-shirted mob tore through the traffic. 100 fascists, reported the New York Times, rushed the attackers. A melee ensued that was quickly dispersed by the police. There was also violence in Brooklyn, where a parade of fascisti
marched from the Angelo Rizza Fascista League at 274 Troutman Street in Bushwick. The LA Times reported several hundred men were parading, including 40 or 50 in the black shirt uniform. Fights broke out between supporters and protesters mingling on the sidewalks, and an anti-fascist was found lying on the ground, stabbed in the back. He survived and identified a fascist as his assailant. Accompanied by 30 police reserves to forestall violence, the marchers made their way through Brooklyn, stopping at the Wilson Avenue station, where the fascisti came to attention and gave the fascist salute. They ended at a Roman Catholic church, where the priest blessed them under large American and Italian flags, while the police remained on guard. The biggest outbreak of violence that Memorial Day, however, occurred in Queens, where it centered around a different right-wing group, not Italian Americans, but the self-proclaimed 100% American kind. By 1927, the Ku Klux Klan had spread across the United States since its rebirth in Georgia 12 years earlier. The first Klan was formed in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, as former Confederate soldiers in Tennessee created a secret society to promote white supremacism, and terrorize the newly freed slaves in the South during the Reconstruction era. The name is generally believed to have originated from the Greek word for circle, kuklos, while Klan pays homage to the mystified Celtic heritage supposedly shared by white Southerners. Within a decade or two, the first Klan had been successfully suppressed by law enforcement and died out by the turn of the century. But in 1915, it was resuscitated in Georgia, and by the early 1920s, the second Klan had achieved a powerful political presence in the United States, not only in the South, but across the country. I would add this is because of 1915, the movie Birth of a Nation came out. The Klan had an active presence in New York City and Long Island by 1927, with favorite slogans, which they even attempted to copyright at various points. That year, the Klan was calling attention to the fact that it first announced the program of 100% Americanism and of America First. They were not, in fact, the first to adopt these mottos, as this book will show. In 1927, both phrases had been around for a decade or more. But as far as the Klan busily copywriting hate was concerned, America First belonged to them. And on Memorial Day in Queens, 1,000 or so of them had gathered to march, many in white robes and hoods. They were accompanied by 400 women from the so-called Clavana, the feminine branch of the Klan. Some of the reported 20,000 spectators in Queens that day objected to the Klan's presence, as others defended their right to march. Scuffles broke out, and it turned into a riot. Women fought women, and spectators fought the policemen and the Klansmen as their desire dictated, said a newspaper. Klan banners were shredded, and 5 of their number were arrested, said initial reports, while a few others were caught up in the confusion as well. The book, Behold America, Sarah Churchwell.
Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com. You know, corporate raiders, when they acquire a company, basically strip it down. They take everything of value out of it, put it in their own pockets, leave just a husk of a company. I watched, Bain Capital do this with Clear Channel. In fact, they just ran it into bankruptcy, and they run off with all the cash. Well, that's what Donald Trump is doing to America right now. He's basically behaving like a corporate raider, taking all the assets of this company and handing as many of them as possible off to billionaires and shutting down programs that benefit average working class people. This is, an all billionaire cabinet, or largely billionaire cabinet, with a billionaire president, and they're dancing to the tune of the billionaires. It shouldn't surprise us, I suppose, but there's a whole article about it over in my Daily Take, entitled Trump's Hostile Takeover of America, the Corporate Raiders' Final Heist, over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
You're out in the streets, you're raising your voice, pushing back hard, 'cause there ain't no choice. You see the storm, you feel the weight, fighting for justice before it's too late. But even warriors need to rest, even lions lay down in their nest. Take a breath, take a break, don't let the fire turn to ash in its way. fight. Find the light. Rest your soul so you can fight. The road is long, the night is cold, but you can't stand tall if you break and fold. So breathe deep, let it be. You're not alone in this battle sea.
Welcome back to
They
the Thom
sell
Hartmann
their lives.
Program, the place where despair is not an option. And picking up your calls here, Anything Goes Weekend. Denise in San Jose, California. Hey, Denise, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I wanted to talk about our immigration problem and how it's being caused by the civil wars going on in Central America.
Yeah. Which
particularly-
most of which you can track back to the Reagan administration.
Right. So particularly in El Salvador and Venezuela right now, because I think what's going on there is we need to look at more deeply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are two countries being run by dictators.
Right. And those civil wars, I happen to be going in and out of El Salvador and Venezuela a lot in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So I was there when the revolution, particularly in San Salvador, was going on.
Whoa. Did you see, by the way, just Maduro, the president of Venezuela, was in Moscow yesterday or the day before yesterday for the big Victory in Europe Day celebrations, with standing there with Putin, along with President Xi?
Yeah. And sadly, I was there in the 70s and I lost track of them, except in the 70s, Venezuela was rolling in money.
Mm-hmm.
It had so much money that they couldn't spend it in Venezuela.
Yeah.
So they were coming to Miami to spend that oil money. Now, to be honest, I lost track of what's going on in Venezuela. But didn't they elect Maduro?
Didn't they what, Maduro?
Elect him.
He was elected. He followed on after Hugo Chavez.
Right. As a socialist. We call them socialists.
Well, he calls himself a socialist. He says he's a leftist, but he's hanging out with Putin. He's I would argue that he's a right winger who uses left wing rhetoric. But
so I don't know, but didn't that happen in Cuba too? Yep. I mean, initially they won power and they wanted to be friends with the United States.
That's correct.
But we refused.
Yeah, Nixon
and then
actually blew that
Russia comes
up.
in.
Yep.
Yeah, Russia comes in.
Yep.
But Venezuela is still actively in civil war.
Arguably.
I
mean, there's a resistance movement within the country, but Maduro's cracking down on it hard. And now that he's friends with Putin, I mean, he's building a strong alliance with China and Russia. This is, and this is Trump. I mean, this is, Biden did it too, the sanctions on Venezuela. Sanctions very rarely produce the result you want. And what our sanctions are doing more and more is simply pushing countries into the open arms of Russia and China.
And pushing the people out into the United States.
Yeah, which is the new
axis. Our immigration problem comes right from there.
Yep.
And my question is, particularly with El Salvador, because I knew the people and they were wonderful people, is how many of, I think it's 1/3 of the young men in their country is in that jail?
No, it can't be 1/3.
Pardon?
It couldn't be 1/3. I mean, I
don't know.
I'm not arguing with you. I have no idea what the number is, but that would be shocking.
That would be shocking. So I don't know where I saw that number, and I wouldn't stand by it either. Yeah. But I would say that the reason those gang men are pushed out of the country, why they're in that jail, is that freedom fighters being jailed, or is that, truly gangbangers?
Well, when Bukele was elected, there was a genuine crime crisis in El Salvador. I mean, these gangs, particularly, I'm forgetting the name of it. I don't think it was MS-13, but there's one particular gang in El Salvador that was, they were basically doing what has happened in chunks of Mexico. They were taking over cities. And, and Bukele came in and in very short order just with no due process. I mean, just started arresting people and throwing them in a jail that they're going to die in. I mean, just, removing them from society permanently. And, it worked to reduce crime. Now, the price that the society has paid is going to be a very, very high price. So it's going to get worse over time because basically he replaced anarchy with dictatorship. And there's a third alternative,
and when you're
which is
in
democracy.
civil war, though, who's the good guy? When you're in civil war, who are the good guys and who are the bad guys?
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to
And
tell.
we listened to them back in the 70s. We labeled all those freedom fighters communist.
Oh, and
we trained death squads.
Yeah, this is so common. I mean, when I was in South Sudan, I spent a whole afternoon with Salva Kiir, who is now the president of South Sudan, and he had he wore these giant leather hats. He's this big man, and he always had an AR-15 or an AK-47 rather strapped over his back. And I interviewed him for a couple of hours. I've got hours of tape of him. And he had just successfully fought off the Sudanese, the Bashir government in Sudan, to claim South Sudan's independence. And in fact, we went back the following year for the anniversary, and I brought back a ballot. He was elected president, and his rhetoric was great. He was the guy who was going to put his country back together. We're going to have a national health care system. We're going to make things work. We're going to reinvent our education. Within a year, he was just another dictator. So there you go.
Well, I think it is sad. And of course, the United States used to be the leadership of democracy, right?
Yeah.
And we used to go in and could have it, like in the 70s in San Salvador, we could have helped them.
Yeah, this is what USAID should be all about. Yeah.
Pardon?
This is what USAID was, in some parts, all about. And we should have, after the damage that Reagan did supporting the Contras and all that, just totally disrupting Central America, or the southern half of Central America, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and there's one other country here that I'm missing. After Reagan did that, there should have been reparations. We should have cleaned all that up, but we didn't. Denise, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Spot on. I'm very concerned about these things too. Michael in Gainesville, Florida. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind today?
Yes, hi. Happy birthday, Tom. You, Thom Hartmann, and Rachel Maddow inspired this. I want you to know. Let's use the boycott power of the 65% majority, which we are, to have a spontaneous, peaceful protest. June 14th and every day afterward, anytime, anywhere, peaceful places you can drive by and just boom, you're a spontaneous road warrior for pro-human rights. And you just pull in and right up, if it's a door, you pull up. Maybe you'll go in, maybe you won't, but then you go on by. If it's a bit of a line, you see a bit of a line, pull in. If it's a long line, pull in, and maybe you'll get a chance to be the one to have to block a road in traffic and rock on. You're an official road warrior. And let's not target every place, okay? Let's target for real. And I've given some thought to this. The real behind-the-scenes politics and media mafia bosses, they're the ones who decide, it's where the money comes from. The people who pay for the ads on TV, control TV, duh. We're talking about Walmart. Drive by Walmart. Drive by McDonald's. If you're hungry, go ahead and buy something. Just pull in. And if you're not hungry, pull in anyway. That's the key. Same thing with ExxonMobil's. If you just target Walmart, McDee's, and ExxonMobil's, and just any time. If you see a line, just pull in behind it, even if you don't want that product. And when you pull up, you get to the point of the front door or the service, just say no thank you and pull on. And they'll know too, and they'll probably give you a high five.
Yeah. I get it.
Happy birthday.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Happy birthday. Thank you very much. Interesting. 45 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay with us. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where despair is not an option. I'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's your media support group for We the People. Right back with your calls in just a moment. So the air traffic controllers in Newark once again lost communications and radar for 90 seconds this morning. Phew! You know, the last 2 times I visited New York, I flew into Newark because we've got, you know, good nonstop flights from Portland to Newark. And I got to get back there sometime in the summer because of the estate of my best friend. Wow. Anyhow, what's on your mind? Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. Hey, Norma, what's up?
Oh, late happy birthday, Tom.
Thank you.
We're the same age again. But anyway, I don't know how many people stay up and watch Stephanie Rule. But last night she had a guy from the Sierra Club, and he's talking about this legislation that's going to make it legal to sell all of the national parks and sell the land under the national forest.
Whoa.
Now, how many people want to go to the park for barbecue? These Trump people going to go out and have their fireworks and their beer and their barbecue? Well, they're not going to be able to get in the park, and they're not. And once they clear cut the forest, it will change our climate here in the United States, and it also will give.
Already is.
I know, and this will also give them permission if the oil companies buy this land to drill anywhere they want, including Anwar.
Yeah.
And I don't know which parks are up. You know, Gettysburg, Lincoln's Log Cabin.
Yeah.
Grand Canyon.
You'd think we would have learned this lesson
Redwood
from the
Forest?
Dust Bowl, Norma. You know, I mean, our tillage practices led to the Dust Bowl, and FDR fixed that by planting over 1 billion trees, and that brought us back.
This legislation's in the Senate now, and it's in there with the new federal residential property tax bill and the Genius bill that makes Bitcoin legal in the United States.
Right.
I was sitting here watching C-SPAN last night, and I don't know what is wrong with these people. That if you can, the parks belong to everybody. This is our legacy.
Yeah,
the national forest.
It was a
belonged
gift
to
from
us.
Republican President Teddy Roosevelt, by the way. He was the one who created the national park system.
And now Trump is going to sell it off the same way he's selling off federal buildings.
Yep.
And it looks to me like he intends to more or less destroy our collective knowledge of our history here. Excuse me. But this Genius bill also, are we going to lose money? Are we going to have to have a Bitcoin account? But the federal property tax on residential property, are you willing to pay that?
Well, if you're talking about the salt tax exemption, this is Donald Trump in his first term wanted to punish people living in blue states, which tend to have higher incomes and higher property values. So they said that if you pay more than $10,000 a year in property taxes, you can't deduct anything over $10,000 from your federal taxes. Now they're talking about raising that to $30,000, but you've got a bunch of Republicans in the House who are all, crazed about this, and it's become very controversial.
Well, what they were talking about last night was tax on every house in the United States.
Oh, a brand new federal property tax?
Property tax, yes. It'll raise rent prices and make people homeless.
Oh, geez. Well, they've got to figure out a way to make up for the tax cuts for the billionaires. So, yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. Norma, thank you for the call. It's always so nice to hear from you. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thank you. It's 10 minutes before the hour. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Welcome back. 10 minutes before the hour. Picking up your calls here. Brian in Everett, Washington. Hey, Brian, what's up?
Hey, happy birthday. And
thank you.
You're God, believe me. You're the only person I need to hear from. I have a situation going on. I had a guy in my apartment. He lives down below me and one over, and he was showing me pictures of his weapons and made a statement about going out and hunting brown people.
Hunting what?
Brown people.
Oh, brown people. Oh, my God.
Yeah, yeah. And where I live, the people above me, I don't know where they're from. I know the gentleman can't speak English, but we get along, and he's a nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
And my whole complex has got people like this.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're legal. I don't know.
Well, Trump is licensing, essentially, this kind of rhetoric and behavior, you know.
Oh, I know.
Kill people of
I know.
color.
And the thing is the, okay, one of the main guys that was locked up because of January 6th, one of the leaders, lives 20 miles south of me.
Mm-hmm.
They know this place because this is where the LGBTQ, all those people are, and all the all the foreigners are in this complex and in this town where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
And they drive by, and I'm just waiting. Something's going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy down here, he's already saying how he's going to.
He's got his weapons and he's ready. Yeah, Brian, I wish you the very best. Thanks for the heads up on it, and let us know if anything happens. But wow, what a story! It's so Americana, right now, sadly. Brian, thank you. Dave in Buffalo, New York. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind today?
Thanks, Tom. About with the opening song that you had for the last segment. If your candle burns at both ends, it's time to get things done now.
Yeah.
And then a common phrase that the Republicans lie to you about or bring up, they say that we're supposed to, the working poor and the middle class are to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, which is from a 16th century story or meme that has meant something impossible to do. So they look down on us and say, do better and pull yourself up by your bootstraps, while it's meant to be something that's impossible to do. But the main topic was that on the Lawrence O'Donnell program a couple of nights ago, Tim Walz sold out the American people, the Democratic Party. He needs to be purged from the or watched over. He claimed that he didn't stand by the American people, and the segment was on why Biden lost, and we know why Biden lost, and then why Kamala lost, and the bottom line was because the Clintons, Democratic Party, the corporate Dems stuck their foot in the door, and Biden's answer was kind of meandering, and they said, well, look at the Treasury Secretary's answer is meandering, but the whole segment was about by the reason why.
I saw it, Dave. I saw it, and I don't want to just kind of rehash Lawrence's program. Or Chris's, I forget which program it was. Thanks for the call. George in Cripple Creek, Virginia. You are on the air, George. What's on your mind today?
Hey, morning, Tom. There's an interesting article in Vestia today. Today's the 80th anniversary of victory in Europe over Nazi Germany, and Putin is accusing the West of rewriting World War II history to denigrate the Soviet Union's contribution in the victory over Nazi Germany. Well, Putin and Soviet and Russian historians are experts at rewriting history. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Non-Aggression Pact of August 1939, Stalin and Hitler partitioned Poland, and Stalin got, the Baltics and Eastern Europe as his sphere of influence, and Hitler Western Europe. And the only reason Hitler could have launched a blitzkrieg against Holland, France, and Belgium in May 1940 is because, he was able to concentrate all his forces in the West, didn't have to worry about fighting a two-front war against the Soviet Union. And Stalin supplied him with multitudes of raw materials, iron, steel, munitions, oil. So the only reason he was able to launch that offensive was Stalin was Hitler's ally, right up to June 22nd, 1941, when Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, his invasion of the Soviet Union. And even up to that time, Stalin continued to supply Hitler with all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So
if we want to talk about rewriting history, let's put it at Putin's and the Russian historian's doorstep.
I'm with you. Do you think that Russia and China are forming a new axis, and that this time they won't stab each other
they're in
the
the
back?
strategic partnership and the immutable friendship and all that kind of stuff. And their navies have conducted joint exercises in the Pacific, et cetera, et cetera.
Do you think there's a chance that they will do what one of them will do what Hitler did, which is stab the other ally in the back and break the alliance? I mean, that's the main reason why we were able to win World War II.
Exactly right. Because China has claims dating back to imperial days of part of Siberia, and even in the late 60s, the Soviet Union and China had border clashes, disputed territory.
George, I'm sorry. I'm completely out of time here. I got to run. But thank you for the call. It's always so great to hear from you. I appreciate it. Special thanks to Louise Hartman, Sean Taylor, Nate Atwell, Jamie Holly, Nigel Peacock, Sue Nethercutt, Patrick Hoyt, Geraldine Halbert, Ron Hartenbaum, Chase Spross, Nicholas Miller, Jay LeBlanc, Jeremy Peterson, Connor Arroyo, Carna Verity, Martha Salinas, Mateo Robertson, Diane Russell, and Ruben Michaels, all the great folks who work on this program and help make it available to you. Thank you for your support. Get out there, get active, tag You're It, and have a wonderful weekend. I'll catch up with you on Monday.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.